Good morning. It has already been a momentous night in the biggest set of elections since Labour came to power less than 2 years ago. Labour has already lost almost 260 seats so far, with support collapsing in some former Labour council strongholds in the northwest of England. Reform UK have won more than 385 seats and have just taken control of Havering, a London borough council, for the first time. The Green Party have gained seats, but it's still too early to know how well the party will do, as counting has only just got underway in the past half hour in many of the Green target councils in London. It's been a difficult night too for the Conservatives. They've lost around 160 councillors, but some gains too for them as the Tories regain control of Westminster.
Here in Cardiff Bay at the Senate, Labour is bracing itself for a loss of power. For the first time since devolution, history could be made. The votes are being counted and we'll soon find out. Plaid Cymru and Reform are vying to become the largest party. We'll have all the results here in the next few hours and bring you guests throughout the morning.
I'm at Holyrood in the heart of Edinburgh in front of the Scottish Parliament. Big questions today. Who will form the next administration? Will a combination of the SNP and Green vote reach the magic number of 65 seats, which will trigger John Swinney's call for a new independence referendum? And will Reform take second place over Labour? Then, would the Scottish Labour leader renew his call for Keir Starmer to go immediately? Counting's underway. We'll follow the results as the SNP try to hold on to power. All 129 seats in the Scottish Parliament are up for grabs.
Well, there is still a very long way to go. Counting is underway, but there are still thousands of seats to be won, just under 4,000 in fact. We will be bringing you all the results as they come in. Vicky Young will be across all of them.
That's right, Sophie. I will be looking at the detail because we're looking for patterns, we're looking for trends to see who's up, who's down, where it's happening and why it's happening.
Well, as it all changes, Professor Sir John Curtice will be with us with his sharp analysis of the emerging and already very different political landscape. And our political editor, Chris Mason, is here. He'll be telling us all. We'll have reporters as well and correspondents' accounts around England, Wales and Scotland. We'll be talking to some of them about the mood there. So do stay with us throughout the morning for Election 2026 here on the BBC. Good morning and welcome. It is less than 2 years since Labour swept to power in a landslide general election. This morning, the party's fortunes could not look more different after what has already been a very bad night for Labour in the English council elections. It is still very early. There are so many more results, thousands to be declared in England throughout today. But in some places, like Wigan in the northwest of England, Labour support has completely collapsed. It is Reform that is surging ahead. Counting has only just begun as well in crucial places in Wales and Scotland for the national parliaments. Let's see what that brings. The Prime Minister spoke for the first time since the results came through a short time ago. This is what he had to say.
Let me be clear, these are really tough results. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And we have lost brilliant Labour representatives, people who put so much into their communities, so much into our party and our movement. And the voters have sent a message about the pace of change, how they want their lives improved. Labour was elected to meet those challenges, and I'm not going to walk away from those challenges and plunge the country into chaos.
Well, a very different night for Reform. Here's Nigel Farage in Havering, a London borough that Reform has just won. The best is yet to come. That's what he said.
I think overall what's happened is a truly historic shift in British politics. We've been so used to thinking about politics in terms of left and right, and yet what Reform are able to do is to win in areas that have always been conservative, but equally we're proving in a big way we can win in areas that Labour have dominated, frankly, since the end of World War I. At the moment, we're winning 1 in 3 of all the seats that are up, but I genuinely think the best is yet to come.
Nigel Farage speaking a short time ago. Let's go straight to our political editor, Chris Mason, who has been following all of this throughout the night. Just looking at those two men alone, the body language, the stances, Nigel Farage, really the confidence coming up to the camera. Tell us what is changing.
I think you've sensed in just the last minute there of the story so far. I think the key thing to digest at this point is that this is just beginning. You can witness and experience an election night having been to bed and leaving the television on during the day today. What are we? 45 councils declared, 91 to go. So that's a third of the picture just in England, with those crucial elections in Wales and in Scotland still to come. So we can't emphasise enough how early the picture currently is. However, as you say, in the body language and the choice of vocabulary from Nigel Farage and Keir Starmer there, a snapshot of where we are. Where are we? We're in a position where Labour have gone significantly backwards. Now, yes, it often happens for governing parties that they suffer in kind of mid-term elections, but the scale and breadth of Labour's defeats are significant, and the scale and breadth of Reform victories are significant, particularly, as you mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, in the northwest of England. Some of those councils there, Tameside and Wigan. Now, granted, where only a third of the seats were up for election, so the scope for losses and gains capped at a third.
Can you just make that clear? Because that is important, isn't it? A lot of the councils we've seen, a lot of the counts overnight, they have been what we call thirds. So not all the seats were up for grabs.
Completely. And therefore, if they were held substantially by a particular party, in these instances Labour, then it was impossible for them to lose control in some of them, even if they lost everywhere that was being fought. So, yeah, an additional complexity where you have these thirds, the idea being that the electorate get an opportunity with each year to offer something of a verdict, but it minimises the scale of swings in any particular direction. But in those pockets of the northwest of England that we were talking about, Labour's defeats were huge, about as bad as it could possibly be. You had a victorious Nigel Farage there in the London borough of Havering. I suspect we'll see him popping up around Britain throughout the day wearing a broad smile. And then the Prime Minister's decision to try and get out early, because it is still early, and sound defiant. And I think a sense from Downing Street that he needed to be out there pretty quickly so he couldn't be accused of hiding away. What's the mood amongst Labour MPs this morning? From the conversations I've had, a mixed picture. There's an awareness of how bleak it looks, but then they confront the big question, which is what do you do in response to this when you have an unpopular party and an unpopular Prime Minister? Now, some are saying to me, look, the name that kept coming up on the doors was Keir Starmer, very negatively, and therefore they asked the question, is it time to change Prime Minister? Others make the argument, maybe if we do that, you end up with exactly the same set of problems, an impatient electorate and a desire for change, but it's just targeted at somebody else. So that's the conversation that is going on privately amongst Labour MPs this morning as they digest this emerging picture.
We're going to be talking to the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, so we will find out what she thinks about it all very shortly. But let's have a look at what has actually happened overnight. Vicky Young has been going through it all. Vicky.
That's right, Sophie. And as you're both saying there, look, this is early days, and the results we have at the moment are English council results. We obviously don't have all of them yet, but there is a picture already developing, a pretty clear picture that Chris was talking about there. So this is Labour council losses, and I'm just going to explain what this screen is showing, because this colour here, this little oblong there, that shows you who used to run the council. So all of these were Labour councils. They have so far lost Westminster to the Conservatives, and then all of these other councils have gone to no overall control, which means there's no one party that has enough to control that council. So let's have a look at the detail of some of these just to show you what is going on here. So this is Tameside. This shows you here that Labour have lost the council. They've got 25 seats, so they were the party that won the most seats, but the others added up together mean that they don't have a majority. So they will have to work out a way to run that council. And look at the change since 2023. Labour down 16, Reform UK up 18. This is an area where Angela Rayner, the former Deputy Prime Minister, has her Westminster constituency. Now, let's have a look at another area, Wigan, because this is what Chris was talking about there. This is why the headline doesn't tell you the whole picture. Because if you look at this, you think Labour hold, it's Wigan, they've done pretty well. They're still running the council. Look, they've got 42 seats. Everything is fine. but it is not, because when you look at the change that's happened, look at this. Labour down 22, Reform UK up 24. What's actually happened here is that Labour has lost every single seat that it was defending. And that's because a lot of these councils outside of London, only a third of the seats are up for grabs. So Reform has won as many as they could have done, but it doesn't give them enough to dislodge Labour. They will still run that council. But if you're Lisa Nandy, who is the Culture Secretary who represents this area at Westminster, you are going to be not very happy seeing what has happened there. And then when you're talking about Reform UK, they are, even now, we haven't got many results in, but even now they are the ones who are making the most gains in terms of council seats. Now, in terms of grabbing whole councils, again, it's a lot harder. Overnight, there weren't very many councils where all the seats were up for grabs, but Newcastle under Lyme in Staffordshire was one of them. And look what Reform have done. They've won 27 of the seats. The Conservatives are down to 15, Labour down to 2. And again, look at this change, highly significant here. Nigel Farage, no wonder he sounded pleased about this. Reform UK up 27. Conservatives down 10, Labour down 17. So you can see there, Reform UK taking from both of those parties. That will be another big discussion throughout the day, the fact that Conservatives and Labour are both down, both doing much more poorly. So this is a partial result, as we said. And Sophie, in terms of the Greens, for example, you know, they're not really featuring here yet, but they will say to you they've got a lot of their good results still to come, they hope, and places like London. So that's the point here. The headlines don't tell the whole picture, but we will tell you the whole picture.
And we've got Sian Berry, the Green MP, who is here and who will be talking to us about that in a moment. But first, we're going to go to Leeds because the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, joins us. Good morning.
Good morning, Sophie.
How bad has it been for you so far?
Well, we have had bad results for Labour overnight. Obviously, there's a lot of the counting still to take place during the course of today and tomorrow. There's 8 councils being counted here in Yorkshire. But we are also expecting some tough results through the course of today as well, based on discussions we've been having on the doorstep and discussions across the country. So, look, it is a tribute to all of those who've stood for elections across the country. It is a challenging thing to do. But of course, that does mean for us, there have been a lot of Labour councillors, real hardworking people who've lost their seats. And I am really saddened and sorry about that, especially when I know they've been affected by national issues. This is going to be a real important time for a serious reflection for us, a period of proper, calm-headed reflection, because when you get elections results like this, it's really important that governments listen and respond, but we do so in a steady, thoughtful and reflective way.
How have you got to this position? I mean, it's less than 2 years since a landslide general election. When you went into these elections, you had more than 2,500 seats. You look set to lose an awful lot more than 1,000 potentially. There's still a lot of counting left to go. How has your party got into this position?
Well, it's exactly that question that I think we are going to need collectively to reflect on properly. Look, we have taken some really important, good decisions in a whole series of areas. Investment in the NHS, which is showing progress. We're seeing progress in areas on policing, on immigration, crucially on child poverty
but that's not
as well.
Getting through to the
no, you're right,
electorate, is it?
and that's the point. And look, for a lot of people who don't see a sense of change, don't feel things are changing, feel real deep insecurity, particularly around things like the cost of living and some of the global pressures. And crucially as well, we haven't given people enough of a sense of hope and optimism for the future about how things can be different
and your losses are worse, aren't they? I mean, in some of your heartland areas, look at what's happened in the northwest of England, in Wigan, for example.
Yeah, and we're expecting more of those really difficult results. And so I think that means there's a big challenge for us, and we've got to reflect on that, about what it is we need to do differently, how we frankly need to do government a lot better, and what are the things that we will need to do.
And does that mean changing your leader? You know that's what everybody's going to be asking. We've already heard the Prime Minister saying he takes responsibility, yet in the same breath he says he is going to fight on and run in the next election. Can he do that?
Well, you're right. You heard the Prime Minister's response this morning, and I'll be honest, I think this is for all of us. This is a collective issue. The Prime Minister, the Cabinet, the whole government and the party needs to be reflecting on this. One of the things I think we're going to need to do is to make sure we are showing how actually it is Labour values around fairness, around tackling injustice and inequality, around bringing communities together that are the best response to some of the deep insecurities that we now face and the global challenges we face. But we're going to have to work a lot harder in order to be able to do that. And of course, there have been areas where we have made mistakes on things like the winter fuel allowance or on the appointment of Peter Mandelson that left people thinking they didn't know who this Labour government was for. So that's why we have to show that actually everything we need to be doing is about making the lives of working people across this country better, giving people hope and optimism for the future. So, of course, there are challenges for us. And I say again, I think this is not a time for the sort of glib explanations or knee-jerk responses, because actually it has to be about that period of reflection. But I also know, having been in politics for a long time, I've seen things go up and down. And I do know that the government, the Labour Party, we have the values that are about the best possible future for this country. But we've got to do a lot of work to show that now.
Foreign Secretary Chris Mason here. Good morning to
Morning,
you.
Chris.
You talk about a desire for calm-headed reflection. What does that actually mean for an electorate that seems to be expressing an exasperation about a lack of change with the pace that they would require, and perhaps are demanding that this should be interpreted as a desire to change who the Prime Minister is?
Well, first of all, we don't obviously have all of the results through, so we've got to get all of the results through. But I also think that the point that Sophie made about the difference now compared to 2 years ago at the general election, that is a really big change. And we obviously had a really strong result at the general election. When you look at something like that, actually you do need a period of proper reflection on how collectively we respond to that. And one of the things we're expecting to see today, for example, is some polarisation in the results and in the way people are voting. Now, that is a challenge for the Labour Party, for people like me that believe in bringing the whole country together, when we've seen people actually moving in different directions in response to the real frustration about things not changing as fast as they want to. So when you've got a response to that polarisation, actually you have to think hard about how do we best bring the country together? How do we make sure we're delivering the changes that we promised at the general election, that we're so determined to take forward, whether that is on the NHS, whether that is on the economy, the cost of living, whether that is on issues around policing and immigration, in all of those areas, building that sense of security for people and also that sense of hope that you heard the Prime Minister talk about this morning.
And Foreign Secretary, I mean, I know you've been out campaigning as well. Overnight, Sharon Hoffman, who's a councillor in Hull, explained what voters were telling her on the doorstep. I want you to listen to this and tell us if you were hearing similar things.
So many people mentioned that they would not vote for Keir Starmer or for anybody that represented Keir Starmer. And obviously, as a local Labour councillor, that's what they saw me as. I'm his representative in our area. And that was the same for several of my comrades who lost their seats tonight. Very, very good councillors, but they were getting exactly the same narrative on the door. We will not vote for anybody that is supporting Keir Starmer, and where that, you know, see us as his representatives, not Labour Party per se, very much focusing on Sir Keir.
We had the Labour leader in Hull as well, Darren Hale. I'm sure you've seen. He said, "I wish Sir Keir Starmer no ill, but I think ultimately he is not the right man for the job to take us to the next level." When you were out campaigning, when you were out knocking on doors, was it Keir Starmer's name that came up time and time again?
We had a lot of different issues on the doorstep, and certainly national issues did come up, and we had probably more conversations about some of the national issues than we did about potholes in the street as well. And so there's no doubt that the national government has been significant as part of this election. I would just, I think, say, though, again, the point I made before, first of all, that I think that this is a collective issue for us, for the Prime Minister, for the Cabinet, for the whole government, and we have to share that sense of responsibility and the things that we need to do differently going forward, listening to the things that people are saying to us and have been saying to us in the way that they have cast their votes during this election.
What is it that Reform is doing? What is it that Reform is offering voters that you are not?
So I think what we've seen and seem to be, look, we'll see how the results play out during the rest of today as well in different parts of the country. But what we do seem to be seeing is that the parties that are expressing anger from the outside, that are able to channel that sense of anger and frustration from the outside of government and from the outside of local government as well, have been picking up support, whether we've seen that from Reform or for the Greens as well. Now, we're a party that wants to be in government and to be delivering things, as you know, and to be actually changing the country, not just doing the sort of shouting from the outside. But what we've got to do is listen to the results that we've had and the real sense of frustration expressed at us that things aren't changing as fast as people want them to, or that they're not seeing that sense of change in their area. But, you know, I do think that, and I know, you know, this is you're on the results show and you're going to be talking all day about, well, what does this mean? What does this mean? Actually, this is something we are going to have to look in real detail at. What are the different things that have happened and properly reflect on this if we're to get the response right and actually be acting in the national interest, focusing on the future of the country as well.
What it means is very, very important, obviously, though, to people right around England, Wales and Scotland. One quick question. Should Andy Burnham be given a way back in to the House of Commons?
That's a matter for the National Executive Committee. I mean, Andy's a good friend of mine and a very talented Mayor of Manchester, a very talented politician.
But he's been blocked. I mean, he could be unblocked. Should he be?
Yeah. I think that's a matter for the National Executive Committee, not for me.
Come on, you must have a view, Foreign Secretary.
So, look, I think Andy is a brilliant Mayor of Manchester and a great politician, and I think will continue to be really good at all sorts of things that he does, and I look forward to continuing to work with him in different ways.
Wasn't an answer, was it? Surely the party has to come to a view as to whether or not he should be allowed back. Clearly it came to a view via the National Executive Committee a couple of months ago. There are plenty of your colleagues who see him as a leading light within the Labour Party who should at least be able to sit on Labour's benches in the Commons if the electorates are happy with that in a particular constituency. Why not come to a view now that that would be something that would be a good idea?
Well, of course, he's a leading figure in the Labour Party and has been for a long time. And Andy and I both sat in the cabinet together before under the last Labour government before 2010. And I'm sure that will continue. He'll continue to be a leading figure. But look, there's decisions the National Executive Committee made that were about, the other knock-on election impact. That is for them to make. And because I wasn't involved in those discussions, and so I'm not going to cut across that process.
Right, we will leave it there. Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper, thank you very much for joining us. I'm sure we will hear more from you later on in the day as the results continue to roll in. A quick thought from Chris Mason about what we've heard. I mean, the Prime Minister's future is what everybody's going to be talking about today.
Yeah, and pretty straight back from the Foreign Secretary there, despite our best efforts. I think those around the Prime Minister, including him, we saw him a few minutes ago, didn't we? Will try and shore up his position today. And in the coming days, they have scheduled the state opening of Parliament, the King's speech for next Wednesday, exactly with that in mind, the idea that that is the ultimate kind of reset and relaunch, isn't it, when you have the horse and trap and the sovereign involved. So that will come next week with their kind of programme for government for the next year or so. But those kind of questions for senior Labour folk are going to follow them around in every interview they do today, tomorrow, and in the coming days if the results continue along the kind of trends that we're seeing so far.
Can I just quickly talk to you about turnout? Because it is up, isn't it? Yeah. I'm just seeing that the turnout in Wales, so we've had nothing yet from Wales, but the first two Welsh constituencies we know that have finished verifying their ballots, they're saying that on average there is a 7-point increase in turnout. We've seen something similar overnight as well in English councils of 8% up, roughly.
Yeah, which is, I guess, an encouraging sign in terms of political engagement, in a sense that people who previously have not been tempted to vote have been tempted to vote. I mean, it'll take time to delve into that and see who it is who might not have voted last time, who might be doing this time, and with what and with what motivation. Reform in the English context, potentially in the Welsh context as well, point to tempting people to vote who might not have done in the past, as do the Green Party. Is it a reflection of that? It's too early to tell, but it's a notable trend.
Right, well, let's introduce our panel here today. Sian Berry, MP, Green MP for Brighton Pavilion, and Anita Boateng, who is a former Conservative Special Advisor and has joined us this morning, both of them too. I mean, first of all, your take, Sian, on what is happening overnight. I know the Green Party are still expecting results because actually a lot of your main targets we're not going to see until later on this morning, later this afternoon.
That is right. About 90% of the places where we expect to see gains are not counted yet. But the overall vote share that we're seeing from the places which have been counted, the swings to us, the gains, the breakthroughs we've made in places like Chorley, Chorley and Salford, and we've made gains in Reading, Exeter. These are places that are very different. They're in different parts of the country. So it bodes well for some of the further places in the north, the county councils that we're going to see electing later on as well. So also we're waiting for London and Wales, where a breakthrough is very much expected there.
And when you say breakthrough, how are you going to measure success? Because it's all very well having breakthrough and having a share of votes, but the way our electoral system works in England means that unless you win, you come second place, that's not really going to help you.
We're looking to be in power in councils, and that could be winning control, it could be winning mayoralties, but it is also about making sure that councils are not just controlled by one party with all the power, making sure that we are strong opposition or that we're working with a dominant party to make sure that their programme is better. These are things that we've been very good at in local councils all around the country over the years. We've built up a strong record of working with other parties to make sure that places are run in the best interests of citizens. We listen to people on the ground, we actually put forward policies that make a difference practically, and then we put them into place. And that's why people are voting for us, and that's the work that they're seeing all around the country that's making them want to have more Greens when they've got Greens already. We've seen some really good gains in places where we've been strong before, which is it's a great vote of confidence in the work we do on the ground.
Anita, just talk us through, I mean, the way the political landscape, certainly in these elections, seems to be changing. There's a real fragmentation. We're so used to the sort of duopoly, as they call it, Conservative Labour duopoly. That is changing dramatically, isn't it?
Yes, and we were only sort of 2019 talking about the two major parties getting, 75% of the vote in the general election. Like, this has happened in a hugely accelerated way, and I don't think it's a blip, and I don't think it's a sort of a momentary rebellion from the electorate. I think there is a genuine thing that I hear, certainly from focus groups and from the discourse amongst politicians who hear it from the streets as well, and when they're knocking on doors likewise, it's that they're really saying, why don't we try something else? It's not a why don't we upend the entire system. It is not necessarily the electorate saying we absolutely love these prospective other parties. They're just going, why don't we try something that we haven't tried before? Because Labour has so quickly and so swiftly disappointed us. And I think that is a real problem actually for both incumbent parties.
But is it a message? Is it a protest vote? Or do you think this heralds a complete change in the way that people will vote at general elections?
Well, I think there's still a long way to go when it comes to a general election and lots of things that could happen in between. But I do think this old idea, we've been talking about the Wiggins and we've been talking about Hartlepool, and this idea of there are heartlands, there are places where you can basically weigh the votes for major political parties. And I just don't think that's the case anymore. And we saw it actually in some of this red wall. Why did we coin the red wall? Why did the red wall fall? Because there were voters that had voted Labour for decades that were no longer doing it. And now they're no longer voting Labour, they're voting Reform, they're voting Green. We just can't assume that voters will vote the way they always have done, because they are looking for the change. And the party that positions themselves as the ones able to do that are going to benefit.
Well, let's just stay with us, because we're going to go to talk to Andrew Rossendale now, who is a Reform from Reform UK, defected to Reform in January this year. Things are changing. Good morning, Mr. Rossendale. Can you hear us? Doesn't seem to.
Yes, I can hear you. Good morning.
Good morning. As I was saying, things are changing.
Yeah, they certainly are. And I think that the country is crying out for change. And in Havering, we're leading that change. We have a Reform UK London Borough for the first time. And I think that it reflects I believe, what people across the country are thinking, that the old parties, Labour and Conservative, have let us down very badly, and we need a fresh start for our council, which we voted for, but also for the country as a whole. And so, yes, things are changing. I think the British people have woken up to the fact that if we carry on as we are in decline, and people want a government and a country which shows pride in itself, lives within its means, and deals with the serious issues that the old parties have failed to address. So yes, change is coming, and Nigel Farage, I believe, is the person that will deliver that change for our country.
Hello to you, Mr Rosendale. Chris Mason here. Clearly it's an achievement for your party to have broken through where you are in Havering. I was struck, though, listening to your leader, Nigel Farage, where you are an hour or so ago, where he talked about not promising miracles. In other words, doing a bit of expectation management. I mean, that's the sort of thing all, I guess, arguably sensible party leaders do. But is it not a recognition that the change that plenty are demanding is actually quite hard to deliver, particularly at a local authority level where budgets are limited, the scope for kind of discretionary spending is limited? In reality, how much change will people where you are notice with a Reform Council?
Right, so I couldn't hear everything you said, Chris, unfortunately. It's not coming through very clearly, but I think I sort of got the gist of what you were saying. So look, the country's bankrupt. Our borough is bankrupt. In fact, Havering is borrowing money for the government just to stay afloat. We have to get back to sound money principles again. We have to reduce the size of the state. We have to ensure that every penny the government spends and local council spending are spent wisely and efficiently. Unfortunately, I think since Margaret Thatcher's days, we've allowed the size of the state to grow and grow and grow, and money to be squandered and wasted, and bureaucracy to build. And particularly following the pandemic, we've seen a massive increase in the size of the state. And I think we need to get back to those principles of small government and good housekeeping, and that is what I think Reform UK councils are going to do. And certainly Havering,
I hear that exactly big picture argument, and some of our audience will cheer and some will perhaps have an alternative view. But what in practical terms will people notice in your borough as a result of electing a Reform Council?
So, first of all, I'm not the leader of the council, I'm not a councillor, I'm a member of Parliament, but if I were to advise my new councillors, I would say to them this: check every penny we give to the Mayor of London. You know, a quarter of our council tax goes to the Mayor of London nearly. Now, where does that money go? I don't really understand what we get for that money that we pay, millions of pounds to the Mayor of London. Do we need a Mayor of London? Isn't that a layer of bureaucracy we could get rid of?
You're blaming other people already, aren't you, Mr Rosendale? What in practical terms are your colleagues running the council going to deliver that will be different? That's what people in Havering will want to know. They clearly want change, but what will change look like?
Look, when you've taken over a council for the first time, you have to look to see what the previous administration has been spending our money on. And we need to get rid of waste, inefficiencies and bureaucracy. We need to look at contracts to see where we can save, look at staffing to see if that can be improved. Every penny we spend has to be done in the most efficient way possible. And I'm afraid that under previous administrations that hasn't been happening. And I think a Reform UK Council has to be radical. We have to be radical in the determination to run things more effectively, more efficiently, and to ensure that local council taxpayers are getting value for money.
Thanks for joining us, Mr Rosendale. We appreciate your time.
Now we can see counting going on South Tyneside, in Cambridge, but crucially, we've had counting going on all night in many councils across England, but what we haven't seen yet are the counts happening in Scotland and in Wales. There they are, Caerphilly, they are counting, very busy there, lots of people casting all those the ballots and putting them in the right boxes, and we will get results later on today. But Clive Murray is outside the Senedd. You can see him there. Good morning, Clive. He'll be taking us through it all today. Clive.
Yeah, hi there, Sophie. Interesting what you were saying a little bit earlier about that turnout seemingly for the elections here. A 7-point increase, that's the suggestion, certainly from those first 2 Welsh constituencies that have finished verifying their ballots. So that's a good sign. People have been engaged in all of this, and we're going to get a first response from Delyth Jewell, who is in Caerphilly at the Blandath Gwent count. Hello to you, Deputy Leader of Plaid Cymru. Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning to you. We know that some Labour figures are suggesting that they've had a bad night. How are you feeling?
Well, I think this could be a momentous day in Welsh politics. I'm really proud of the campaign that Plaid Cymru has run, and obviously the people of Wales have spoken, and we're about to find out what it is that they've had to say. But I'm hopeful that this will be a significant day in our history.
I mean, the polls leading into these elections suggested that it would be possibly Plaid or Reform who would be leading the way. Why do you think traditional Labour voters may have turned away from them?
Well, I think that it's been clear for a while now that voters in Wales have been looking for a change. Evidently, Labour have been in power here for the entire history of devolution of 27 years. But I think that people have been vying for that change, and there was an internal party memo from another party that was leaked a few months ago that said that Plaid Cymru was the party that represented the hope. And I think that, well, I feel hopeful that people across Wales will have voted in their thousands for that message of hope and ambition that Plaid Cymru's put forward, that things can be so much better than they have been.
Unlikely, though, that you're going to get an overall majority, given the new voting system.
Well, obviously, we don't know none of the counts, but I think the count has started now. We've had some verifications overnight, but I feel hopeful that we will see a significant increase for votes for Plaid Cymru. And, you know, this is a really momentous moment for Wales. I know that there will be a temptation, of course, to see what's happening here through the prism, possibly, of either English politics or certainly Westminster dynamics, but there is a distinct Welsh story emerging here. One of, again, I think thousands of people will have put their faith in Plaid Cymru, not just as an idea of a vote against other parties, but a vote in favour of something better for this wonderful nation of Wales. And really, that Welsh voice has spoken. I think today we will find, and I feel hopeful that we will find, that we have spoken with a distinct accent.
A distinct Welsh accent. Is Rhun ap Iorwerth, in your estimation, going to be the First Minister when this whole process is over, potentially by the end of today, tomorrow, who knows?
Well, obviously, I think that Rhun ap Iorwerth would be the figure now who could unify Wales, the figure for First Minister who would represent hope for our communities. It has been an election that in many ways has been a battle for Wales's soul, where it has been very polarised between Reform on the one hand and Plaid Cymru on the other. Plaid Cymru very much representing the hope and the idea of ambition, that things, as I say, can be so much better than they are. Plaid Cymru as the party, if we had a Welsh First Minister, Rhun ap Iorwerth as First Minister for Plaid Cymru, not just for our party, but the whole of Wales, to stand up for Wales's corner and to fight Westminster when we need to, but not just that, to make sure that we have a better deal, that our public services improve. You know, this could be a really exciting moment. The coming hours, of course, will be crucial.
All right, Delyth Jewell, Deputy Leader of Plaid Cymru at the Caerphilly count. Thanks for joining us. I've got two guests with me here outside the Senedd. Jack Lana, lecturer in political science at Cardiff University, and Guto Hari, former Director of Communications for Boris Johnson at Number 10. It's good to see you both. First of all, Guto, to you. This could be a historic day. Even you're not old enough to remember Labour not winning a set of elections here. How seismic could this moment be?
It's huge. This has been a one-party state. The first ever Labour MP ever, a man called Keir Hardie, was an MP in Wales. Ramsay MacDonald, first Labour Prime Minister ever, was an MP briefly in Wales. Then you've got Michael Foot, Neil Kinnock. You've got Jim Callaghan, who was Prime Minister, was represented this city that we're in today. It's huge, and they've run Wales since devolution. So this is massive for Wales, big change of direction. But this, and I've waited a long time to say this is one moment in Welsh politics that is absolutely key to Westminster politics. This, I think, is the trigger on the gun that, that takes out Keir Starmer. And if this doesn't take him out, he will lead Labour to the next election.
You're
because
convinced of
he
that?
cannot survive this without surviving right through. So this is the moment, whether Labour MPs in Westminster want to take it or not, there won't be a bigger moment than this.
When a party turns on its leader, and you know this.
Yeah.
Exactly. What was your advice to Boris Johnson, and what would your advice be to Keir Starmer now?
It's a big thing to say walk away, and even when the evidence is stacked so heavily against you, and I think we've got to that point with Keir Starmer, my advice to Boris Johnson, and it was late at night when 40 or so ministers had resigned, was, don't take a decision like this without at least sleeping on it. So he literally went upstairs to the flat in number 10, slept on it, but woke up at 5 a.m. and a couple of hours later, people like you were outside in the street, and he resigned. And I think we're looking at something very, very similar now.
All right. Jack, there is a visceral, emotional connection that so many generations of families here in Wales have with the Labour Party. It seems as if that emotional connection is cut.
Yeah, I mean, it's so central to Welsh politics, and especially in South Wales, it's central to the idea of Welshness itself. To be Welsh for a lot of people means that you are a Labour person. So we have that breaking, like you say, we can go back 5 generations essentially of some families in some of these areas who have never voted anyone potentially other than Labour. So a big change. But if we look, there has been a slow decline in the last 20 years, 30 years, maybe hidden slightly by the Westminster electoral system and the old electoral system we used to have here. But it seems like with recent inflation and COVID in particular, which was a huge learning curve for voters here in Wales, what's devolved and what's not, that seems to have broken the bond. And when these bonds break, voting is habit forming, it's hard for them ever really to be put back together in some way. So huge changes.
Fascinating. Jack, you're going to be with us for much of the morning. Guto, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Now we're going to get the picture from Scotland and Kirsty.
Well, here we are in Scotland. We're not expecting results till lunchtime, but right now everybody's talking. The big story, of course, is Wales. It's the English Council elections, and it's also Keir Starmer. And we're delighted to be joined by Douglas Alexander, the Secretary of State for Scotland, who is standing by to speak to us from Glasgow BBC. Douglas Alexander is there, I think. Yes, he is. Good morning, Douglas Alexander.
Good morning, Kirsty. Greetings from Glasgow.
2 years after a landslide, Labour is stumbling all over the place. You don't change the pilot mid-flight, is the Labour story. Well, you do if the pilot's about to crash the plane. Is Keir Starmer's time going to be up at the end of today?
The Prime Minister's already said this morning he's not going to walk away, but it's right to recognise, as he did, that there's no sugarcoating the results that have come through in England already. These are very tough results for Labour. And I think it's incumbent on all of us at every level of government to reflect on how we can be better and do better in the coming 3 years of this Parliament. But the Prime Minister's been very clear. He was elected with a mandate for 5 years, and he fully intends to serve through that mandate and build back stronger.
That is, of course, the Labour line. Let's look at Scotland now. Your job is to do the best for Scotland. And therefore, when the Labour leader, Anna Sarwar, in February calls for Keir Starmer to go, that is a big thing. You are a friend of Keir Starmer, a friend of Anna Sarwar's. You're also tasked with getting the best for Scotland. If this result in Scotland will be bad for Labour in favour of reform, then that's another argument, isn't it, for Anna Sarwar's position that actually, on the doorstep, Keir Starmer, who has not campaigned in Scotland at all, just like Boris Johnson, he never came north because he wasn't wanted. What a position is that for a Prime Minister? Surely that is an indication that you can't hang about with this.
Well, we've only been counting here in Scotland for about an hour. The people have spoken, but frankly, we don't yet know what they've said. So I think the word "if" was doing a lot of work in your sentence there, Kirsty. The reality is, of course, the Scottish National Party benefit from divided opposition, and in that sense, Reform can't win this election in Scotland, but they can help the SNP. And in that sense, that's been a message we've been seeking to communicate over the last few weeks. But let's wait and see what the voters have decided in the coming hours.
But what you're the implicit words there are Labour didn't do enough in this campaign to see off the threat of reform in Scotland.
Well, frankly, Kirsty, I just don't accept that. Let's see what the results say. You don't have any idea, and neither do I right now, what the indications are going to be in terms of the coming hours. What I can tell you is we've been very clear from the outset. We want this to be recognised as an election with consequences for our schools, for our hospitals, for our ferries. This is not simply an opportunity to protest about a government somewhere else. It's an opportunity to change the government here in Scotland. That's been a message we've been seeking to prosecute throughout the campaign.
But when you talk to people who've been talking to people on the doorstep, Keir Starmer comes up. It's not, and of course, you know, the very big questions to be asked about the Scottish Parliament and the running of the Scottish Parliament. But the truth is, if the leader of Labour in Scotland calls for Keir Starmer to go, that has consequences.
Well, I don't need to talk to people who have been talking on the doorsteps. I've been talking on the doorsteps. I think I did 27,000 steps yesterday in East Lothian, getting out the vote for our great Labour candidates. So the reality is, of course, people are troubled both by the state of the world. We've been fighting this campaign amidst everything that's happening in the Middle East. Of course, people are impatient for change just 2 years after the election of our Labour government in July of 2024. I get that. I recognise that. I feel and I see the frustration that you describe. But on the other hand, the message we've been communicating here in Scotland is this is not simply a judgment on 2 years of a Labour government, but also a judgment on 2 decades of a Scottish National Party government. Politics in Scotland, frankly, is different. We've had multi-party politics for decades in Scotland, and in that sense, it's right to recognise that as we look ahead to the results today.
Absolutely, and we should always remember that the Scottish Parliament voting system was designed so that somebody did not have a hegemony, that there were coalitions. But just to finish with you, we just heard Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary, saying that you've got to do government a lot better. Don't you have to do government a lot better, a lot faster? There is no time to hang around having endless conversations about what's going wrong. You know what's going wrong.
So listen, I agree with Yvette. Not only do we need to be better, but we've got to do better. That means both how government operates, how government communicates, but also how we make the case in a multi-party context as to why Labour values are the compass by which we should navigate the challenges that the country faces. And I can assure you, we are committed at every level of government to doing exactly that in the coming months and years.
Thank you very much, Douglas Alexander. And we'll be chewing over all this with Brian Taylor, the political commentator and broadcaster soon, and Emily Gray, Managing Director of Scotland Ipsos. Sophie.
Kirsty and Clive, thank you both. Well, let's just bring you up to date with where we are now. So there were 5,047 seats up for grabs. 1,161 of those have already declared. So we still have a very long way to go this morning and this afternoon. 46 councils have declared, 90 more to go. But you can see the state of the parties there, and you can see just how well Reform UK are doing. Huge gains, surging forwards. They had 2 seats, you have to remember, coming into this. The Labour Party had more than 2,500. Reform UK making huge gains already. They're up 396 seats. The Conservatives down 171. The Labour Party, big losses there for them, 259. You can see gains for the Lib Dems, gains for the Green Party as well, though the main target areas for the Green Party are yet to count. Well, they're doing it now. We haven't had the results yet. And those are the results as they stand at the moment. What is all of this going to mean for the Prime Minister? That is what everybody is asking this morning. Tom Baldwin, former Labour advisor, journalist, biographer of Sir Keir Starmer, has joined us. How do you think the Prime Minister is going to be feeling at this point?
I think he'll be feeling extremely sore. I mean, this hurts him. I think the last 2 years have hurt him in a way. You know, he's as frustrated as anyone by the pace of change, getting things done. I think he's frustrated as anyone by the sort of inward-looking conversation we've had about politics and about this advisor, that advisor, who's up and who's down in Downing Street, rather than changing the country. And, you know, he does have huge reserves of resilience, but that doesn't mean he doesn't feel it when you get results like this. And I think what he needs to do now is find not just resilience, but some confidence, some forward-looking momentum, some positivity, rather than this endless pain and negativity.
And we saw him speaking a short time ago. He did, I mean, he did look quite shaken, really, didn't he? And that's only the early hours of the count. You describe him as a proud and stubborn man. What will he do now, though? Because we heard him say, this is my responsibility. What is happening is my responsibility. And yet he says, I am fighting on. I'm going to continue. I'm going to go lead my party into the next election.
Yeah, I think he feels it's his duty to stay now, partly because we're in a global crisis, we're in a cost of living crisis. I don't think the British public would forgive the Labour Party if it went into a sort of self-indulgent leadership thing, which meant interest rates spiralled and debt repayment spiralled. But also pretty sure that he doesn't want to leave on these terms, defined by a single decision he took about Peter Mandelson, which I don't think he really ever really wanted to take, defined by a kind of politics he despises. So, it's this moment where you want to turn the government inside out. It's been so inward-looking. We've been talking about who's up and who's down, all this Westminster stuff. And what he did with the Labour Party in opposition was turn it inside out, so turn to face the British people again. I think what he is desperate to do is get back to that, turning to face the British people, rather than this inside Westminster politics, which is kind of defining him, even though he's disdained it. And that's his sort of peculiar agony, that he's up to his neck in the stuff that he didn't want to be associated with. And that's down to him.
Tom, Nick Watt here.
Hello, Nick.
Hello, we may have met before. Obviously, you wrote that very well-received biography of Keir Starmer, and you worked for Ed Miliband for a number of years. So you are unique here in knowing these two people, Keir Starmer and Ed Miliband, really well. What do you think of that report in our old newspaper, The Times Overnight, which says that 2 weeks ago, Ed Miliband privately advised the Prime Minister that it might be a good idea for him to set out a timetable for his departure to avoid a sort of an unseemly row. And you know, because you've written these sorts of statements in the past, we don't comment on private conversations. We don't acknowledge, we don't accept that account. That's not a denial, is it?
I also know when I wrote things for the Times in the past, I didn't always get it 100% right all the time. You're right, I do know Ed Miliband very well. I know Keir Starmer. And I know they've been talking a lot about, not least because we've got an energy crisis, that real world crisis that doesn't always get talked about enough. We've got, we're only a few weeks away from running out of petrol. There's a lot of reasons why the Prime Minister and the Energy Secretary should be talking right now. I have not heard that they discuss some timetable. You say it's private. If it was private, then maybe it wasn't intended for us to hear. Maybe it didn't happen. I don't know. And nothing I've heard suggests it did.
But you saying that Keir Starmer wouldn't want to leave on these terms, defined by this result, defined by the mess over the Peter Mandelson appointment, that doesn't sound like fulfilling what he's calling his 5-year mandate.
Again, I don't know, and I don't think anybody does know. Politics is really febrile, it's volatile. 2 months ago, he was definitely out, and you sounded like a lunatic if you said Keir Starmer was going to stay on. 3 weeks ago, he was definitely safe. Now he's toast again. I mean, it swings around all the time. What I do know is it would be an utter disaster for Labour to have an inward-looking leadership contest now. What Labour should do with a 165-seat working majority in the House of Commons and 3 years until next election is get on with governing. And what Keir Starmer, I hope, will do on Monday is set out the positive reasons for him to stay rather than just the negative ones. Set out a forward-looking agenda around which Labour can unite for the next 12 to 18 months, and then let them get on with it. And if people want to have a conversation about leadership contest another time, maybe they can. But let's get on with governing now.
Well, let's talk about leadership of the other parties as well. I think we're going to be talking to Ed Davey from the Liberal Democrats shortly, but we've also got Sian Berry here, and we're talking to Anita Boateng. Let's talk about the leadership prospects of Kemi Badenoch. I mean, we're seeing a difficult night for the Conservatives. It has been difficult for the Conservatives. Where is it leaving her leadership, do you think?
I think her leadership is actually in a pretty strong position, because I think the one thing that Kemi Badenoch knows is who she is and her politics. And I think that's the thing that Keir Starmer sorely lacks. And I think that we have seen it over the past 2 years. And honestly, if he doesn't know what he's for now, if he doesn't have a positive position for the country by now, he won't get one. And I think that's what the public is slowly starting to realise. Whereas Kemi Badenoch, it started very, very difficult, but I think she's found her footing and found her voice on issues like the economy, on issues like energy, on issues like government failure. You can see, and actually you hear this in focus groups, the public saying she knows what she's about, there is a courage there, and I think the public are sorely needing that. Whether that will translate into pulling up the party's poll numbers, there's still a long way to go on that front.
Is the Green Party's success down to your new leader, even though he's had difficulties in the past few days because of what he put on social media in the wake of the Golders Green attacks? Is it Zach Polansky who is driving the success at the moment of the Green Party?
I think partly it is. He's
Just
drawn
partly?
enormous attention to the people working on the ground, the policies that we have that are not just environmental policies, but we are a team in the Green Party. We always have been. And a lot of the work that's gone on the ground is from existing local councillors, is from people knocking on doors and genuinely listening to people. And Zach has been tremendous at getting out around the country. I don't think any party leader has visited more places, even Ed Davey, or done more exciting things
He's
in
had a
local
lot of energy,
areas.
quite clearly. But
Yeah,
is there
and
a
that
risk,
makes a big difference to the morale on the ground.
But
That's
is
why
there
I'm
a
doing
risk
so
that
well.
he's going to raise running before he can walk?
I think everyone gets very enthusiastic and gets full of energy, but yeah, there's lots of other of us who are very, very happy to be out on the airwaves this morning, out around the country supporting people. We've got 5 MPs now. We've got 2 members of the House of Lords. We're going to have many more people in the running of councils who can speak up for the Green Party. I think you'll see a lot more of us.
But do you think the Green Party should actually be not quite so much about him, the leader, because he is really polarising the views?
I always liked when we had co-leaders, and I know lots of people did not. I like politics where you are talking about policies, where you're talking about teamwork and communities, and not so much about personalities.
So you'd like to go back to you'd like to go back there.
The focus on him, the amount of attention and vitriol that's gone into attacking Zach Polansky personally in recent weeks has been very unhealthy. In a really, in the media, in politics, that's not what I want to see from anyone.
But
basically.
Sian, you saw a 14-point drop in Zach Polansky's net favourability ratings in one poll in the last few days of this campaign. Do you think the way that he responded to that Golders Green attack, which was to repost somebody who was critical of the police in the way they apprehended the suspect, was that a bad misstep, and did that damage your party?
I mean, there's no doubt that... Zach apologised for this. No one thinks that was a good idea. But the way he apologised, I thought, was really good. He said that, we shouldn't be having everybody weaponising this issue. We need to lower the temperature and all work together to defeat anti-Semitism. That's a really strong message about bringing communities together, and I think was well received.
Okay.
Was well received on the doorstep as well.
Sian Berry, Anita Boateng and Tom Baldwin, thank you all very much for joining us this morning. Let's go over to Vicky now.
Yep, and let's look at the really main story of the night, and then presumably what will continue a little bit today, because it is Labour council losses. So these are the councils that Labour have lost control of. You can see here the red oblong telling you that they used to run the council. For example, they've lost Westminster in central London to the Conservatives, and all these other councils, these have gone to no overall control. So no party has enough seats on that council to run it on their own. So there's going to be a lot of chatting to find out who is going to do that. Let's look at some of them in detail. So this is Hartlepool in the northeast of England. You can see here, Labour and Reform have 15 seats each, but Labour have lost control of the council. And you can see the change here. Labour down by 7, Reform UK up by 12. And actually, the MP that represents Hartlepool, the Labour MP, has called on Keir Starmer to resign. Let's have a look at another one of these councils. This is Southampton, and this just shows you the geographical spread, if you like, of the loss. This is now down on the south coast of England, a Labour loss. Labour have 24 seats. You can see the others there, pretty evenly spread, but it's the change that we want to look at here. Labour down by 10 seats, Reform UK up by 8. And actually, look at this. So the vote share really does tell you this is definitely five-party politics that we are in now, with Labour on 21, Reform UK, the big gainers here, up to 26%, but the Greens there on 20% with their share of the vote. They'll be hoping to do better in some of the councils later. And then look at the change. This is what is telling the story underneath the headline, if you like. Labour down by 25%. Reform UK up by 26%. The Conservatives also down by 19%. So a story there of the two old main parties, if you like, we can call them that in England, really struggling there to hold on to their seats. And then we've been talking, haven't we, about Reform UK, the definite overnight winners so far, majority of 23 here. Now, this is Havering. This is on the border between London and Essex. And you can see here, well, this is pretty dramatic. 39 seats Reform UK have gained. Just to say, the Residents' Association, this is a local grouping there. They've got a sizable number of councillors on that council. But look at the change here. Reform UK up 39 seats. And it's the Conservatives there who are the ones who've suffered dramatically, down by 23. And I think they've ended up with no seats at all on this council. So very bad news for them. You can see Reform UK taking from both Labour and the Conservative in lots of parts of England. The Greens, as we keep saying, this is not the full picture. The Greens will be hoping in places like London that they will do better, and they are certainly taking votes from Labour. It doesn't always mean that they win seats or even councils, but they are certainly eating in to the Labour vote, and we should see more of that later on, I'm sure.
I'm sure, Vicky, we will. Well, the counts continue. 46 councils have declared. There are 90 to go, so that is still thousands more votes up for grabs. Just to remind you, there were more than 5,000 seats this is in England, up for grabs, and we've only had 1,161 that have been declared so far. We can go to some of those counts. You can see them there on your screen. That's Sunderland and South Tyneside. And also, just to tell you, we've had word from Gateshead, where Reform sources are telling our reporter there they think turnout is high, which they claim could be an advantage to them. But let's go to Birmingham and to Camden now. We've got Elizabeth Glinker in Birmingham. Noor Nanji is in Camden at the counts that are taking place there. They started about 9 o'clock this morning. Let's start with you, Elizabeth. What is the mood there?
The mood here, I would say, is fairly nervous. The city of Birmingham was celebrating last night because Aston Villa made it into the final of the Europa League. Today, the mood is definitely nervous. We're still verifying here. We were actually 40 minutes late opening the boxes here in Birmingham because there are so many candidates at this count, more than 600 trying to get into the venue this morning. This is a huge council, a city of 1.2 million people, the largest unitary authority in the whole of the UK. There are 101 seats here, and for the first time, all of the national parties in England are running candidates in all of those 101 seats. Plus, we have sizable numbers of independents as well who could make a real difference in the city centre wards. Labour has run this council for the last 14 years, but they are likely to have a very difficult day here. Talking to Labour staffers this morning, they are realistic about the situation here. Not only are they contending with the national picture, which is reflected in the national polling and the results we've already seen coming in overnight, but here in Birmingham the council went bankrupt in 2023, and there is that ongoing bin strike that people may have heard about now in its 14th month. So Labour really on the back foot here in Birmingham. What we are looking to see is whether Reform UK, which at the moment doesn't have any representation here in Birmingham, can push in both on some of those Labour seats, particularly in the north of the city, in the south, in the kind of post-industrial areas around the old Rover Longbridge site, whether they can make headway there, and whether the independents can really upset what is the traditional heartland of Labour in Birmingham right across the middle. Then at the same time, we have the Greens, who at the moment only have 2 seats here, who are pushing in some of the kind of more leafy wards of Birmingham. We have the Conservatives, who have traditionally been very strong here in Birmingham. Can they hold back that tide of reform that is trying to push in? And the Liberal Democrats as well, you know, surprisingly strong in this city. They've quietly mounted a very organised campaign on the streets here in Birmingham. So we are likely, I think, to see quite a complicated picture. As I say, we're thinking there may be recounts. It is going to be a long and pretty arduous day for the teams here. And by the end of it, the most likely outcome that the majority of people are looking at here is no overall control. That's what people are expecting. Which means that even when we do get results,
obviously, these are the local elections. This is all about how cities, how areas are going to be run. What will it mean if that is the case for people in Birmingham?
Well, I don't know. Like all government, we know, don't we, that it is the officers, it is the civil servants often that keep the wheels of that government going. But there is a serious question. I think at the highest levels of government and certainly regionally, people are concerned about the outcome here. And if it isn't clear, we know that that could mean negotiations that go on over several days or even weeks to try and find a way of people coming together to run this council, who is going to be in charge. And as I've said, I think it is highly unlikely that we're going to see one party with a clear majority, if only because the demographics of this city mean that it isn't easy for any one party to take that win. So yeah, I mean, what it means going forward is there's a lot of uncertainty, and the mayor of the West Midlands, the Labour mayor of the West Midlands, Richard Parker, has been talking about this in recent days and was talking about it indeed this morning. You know, there is concern that this city, this huge local authority, could lack leadership. And what does that mean for the people of the city, not just for the services that they require every day, but also for things like investment and strategic leadership for the area, because of course Birmingham is a huge anchor for the wider West Midlands in terms of investment and business.
Lizzie Glinker in Birmingham, thank you. We're going to go to Camden now, which is obviously the Prime Minister's territory. Noor Nanji is there. It's going to be symbolic, this one. What is the mood there?
Well, that's right, Safi. I'm here in Camden Council headquarters, home to many cultural attractions, the British Museum, the British Library, the Roundhouse, Camden Market, but of course, as you say, crucially also home to Sir Keir Starmer's own constituency seat. He is the local MP for Holborn and St Pancras. So I think this is one of those votes that people will be looking at very closely over the coming hours. Now, counting began at 10 a.m, so you can see some of it taking place behind me, and that is expected to go on over the day, with results starting to emerge in the early afternoon and then a result around 6 o'clock. Now, historically, this is a Labour stronghold, and Labour went into this election here in a dominant position. In the local elections back in 2022, they secured 47 out of the 55 councillors. But we also know that this is one of the areas where the Greens are hoping to do really, really well, and the Liberal Democrats as well will be hoping to win some more seats. So there's a lot to look out for. Now, a bit of history for you. We know that back in 2006, this borough went to no overall control. And that is the first time and the only time in the last 50 years that Labour has failed to win outright here. So any repeat of that, or indeed anything even close to a repeat of that, will be embarrassing for Sir Keir Starmer. Of course, as I say, this is his backyard, but also will mean some uncertainty for the people, as we were hearing there, when a borough does go to no overall control. But of course, Labour will be hoping that they have done enough here to hold on to their overall majority and to retain control of this council. One other thing just worth mentioning, there is also the Camden People's Alliance, a new political party, and going into this election they struck a deal with the Greens, which meant that the Greens wouldn't stand in 2 of the target wards, and so we're going to wait and see what happens there and how that might impact the counting and the results.
Noor Nanji, thank you in Camden. Right, we have with us Robert Jenrick, Reform, who defected from the Conservatives in January, Victoria Atkins, MP, Conservative MP, and Daisy Cooper, who is the Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats. We're going to be talking to all of you in a moment, but first we're going to go to Downing Street because our correspondent Henry Zeffman is there. Henry.
Hi, Sophie. Yes, just beginning to get some reaction from Labour MPs who, in many cases, actually have woken up to digest the results that came in overnight, like many of us. This one I'm going to read you, and obviously it was sent to me on condition that I wouldn't use their name, but it's kind of representative, actually, albeit slightly at the more extreme end, of some of the mood in parts of the Labour Party right now. They said to me, it's just horribly sad, probably points to the death of the Labour Party if Keir Starmer continues. Just to repeat there, that is a Labour MP saying that these results point to the death of the Labour Party under their current leader. Another MP said to me, I would back quite literally anyone at this point just to make it stop. Also spoken to a government minister who says they would like there to be a challenge to Keir Starmer, but in their words, the cabinet is too weak. That is not the universal perspective of Labour MPs I've spoken to. There are some who believe that the results so far are actually a shade less bad than they feared, particularly actually some who believe that the London results that came in overnight don't necessarily point to quite as serious a challenge to the Labour Party from the Green Party as they expected, although we'll see whether in parts of north and east London, which the Greens have been targeting, that bears true over the course of the day. But I think what you are just beginning to see play out, and we're very much in the foothills of it, is a big battle in the Labour Party of interpretation, of how to interpret these results, and then as a result, how to decide what to do next.
Henry Zeffman with the latest there from Downing Street. We're actually going to go quickly to the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Ed Davey, who joins us now, I think, from Portsmouth. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
How has your night been then?
Oh, it's a fantastic night. We're on course for a record-winning streak. We think we'll have our 8th consecutive year of local government gains. Never happened before. And we're the party taking on reform. I'm here in Portsmouth, where Nigel Farage visited quite a number of times. They thought they were going to win. It was the Liberal Democrats who won and saw off reform. And up in Greater Manchester, in Stockport, reform were hopeful there, but it was the Liberal Democrats who took control of that council. Actually, our best results are still to come in places like Surrey and Sussex and Huntingdon and Southwark in London. So, yeah, we're really up for it tonight. And I've been serving coffee. I'd love to give you a coffee, Sophie.
You're sounding very buoyant there, but I mean, you say your number of seats that you're getting is up, the 8th consecutive election in a row, but actually the share is what's important, isn't it? And that isn't up, that's down, if anything.
Not at all. I mean, I'm afraid that people get focused on that. It's actually, are you winning? The last general election, our share vote didn't go up massively, but we won a record number of seats, our best ever number of MPs for over 100 years. So we keep winning, and that's what's important. So you can actually hold off reform. And what we are offering is change. I think people across the country are fed up of the Conservatives and Labour. That's why they're having such bad results today. But they want change. And yes, some are going to the extreme populist changes, where sort of burn it all down type change from the Reform and Greens. We offer a different change, which is build it up, which is far more in tune with British values of tolerance, decency, respect for the rule of law and individual freedom, with a real plan to turn around our economy, our health service, our defence. So I'm really proud of what Liberal Democrat campaigners have achieved across the country.
Look at
I'm looking forward to even better results as they come in later.
So, Ed, you can see what's happening now. The political landscape is changing very dramatically. We're seeing a surge for reform voters. The Greens are already winning and they're expected to win more. We haven't seen their results yet. Why are people not flooding towards you then? Why are you not seeing the same sort of surge that reform is?
Well, in the areas where we are strong, we are seeing that. Take Sutton in South East London. We won 22 councillors there last night, more than we expected, and we held off reform. In Richmond, we defeated 5 Greens. So it's not quite the picture that you're painting. In areas where we've been working really hard, people have been backing the change.
So it's about areas.
And in local government, they actually want local people who are going to stand up for their community.
Have you given up being a national party then? Is that what you're saying?
Sorry, Sophie, I missed you.
Have you given up being a national party? Is that what you're saying?
Not at all. Look at our... Not at all. If you look at our results here in Portsmouth in the south of England, we've had fantastic results. Up in Greater Manchester, in Stockport, we've had fantastic results. Well, let's hear some of our results from the north of England. I think you'll hear fantastic results there. And in Scotland, where they're still counting, but we've got a smile on our faces with the Scottish Liberal Democrats. So, no, we are a national party, but we keep winning. We keep winning at the general election with our best results for 100 years. Last May, we beat the Conservatives and Labour for the first time ever in the number of councillors we elected. I wouldn't be surprised if you see that again tonight. And as I said at the beginning, this would be a record-winning streak of 8 consecutive years of gains. That's really substantial progress across the country, and I'm really proud of what we're doing.
Sir Ed Davey, thank you very much for joining us this morning from Portsmouth. So we're going to talk now to some of our panel here. Victoria Atkins, Conservative MP, Robert Jenrick and Daisy Cooper, who have all joined us. Victoria Atkins, we haven't actually spoken that much about the Conservatives already this morning. It's not been a good night for you, has it?
Look, we knew that this was going to be a tough night for us because we are less than 2 years away from a general election which we have fully acknowledged we took a clobbering. And so it's going to take time, and we know that for us to recover, we have to listen. We have to come up with policies that people want to see, such as scrapping stamp duty, such as scrapping business rates for thousands of businesses on our high streets. But we have to win trust. And last night, it was a tough night. We lost some brilliant local councillors, but we are also seeing signs of progress. And so when we look at, for example, the results in Westminster and Wandsworth, in Bexley, somewhere that Reform very confidently claimed they would win, and did absolutely failed to do so. We are seeing progress in this journey, but none of us pretend that this is the end of the line, and we are very conscious it's going to take time.
We can see on the screen there the loss in Hampshire. That was a Conservative council since 1973, but a couple of times when it was no overall control. But really big losses for you there.
And as I say, we've always acknowledged that last night was going to be tough for us. But what's interesting is that when the analysis starts to come in, it suggests that Reform didn't do as well as they did last year. And I know this because, sadly in Lincolnshire, we had a Reform County Council elected last year. We've seen council tax go up. And when I was out on the doorstep in Lincoln City this week, I was asked them, how do you think they're doing? And even those people who were going to vote Reform said, well, it's not been great. And so, we know that we have challenges, but we're not trying to avoid this. We are being absolutely transparent about this. But also, we have the most popular leader in politics. Kemi, wherever she goes, people love what she's doing in Parliament. They love the fact that we are the ones taking the fight to this government.
And people have been talking about the Babe not bounce, haven't they? But I mean, it hasn't really translated in these elections so far.
Yeah, but it will take time. As I say, we fully acknowledge the clobbering that we got to, less than 2 years ago. The fact that Kemi has run such a positive campaign, we've had a united team across the country.
So, I mean, clobbering,
really
you said that for the second time, clobbering. I mean, how long is it going to take then before you rebuild? There's a general election is, 3 years away?
Well, we are laser focused on elections in the run-up to the general, of course, but nobody should believe the snake oil salesmen who claim that all of the issues facing our country can be dealt with easily and quickly, and then they quickly run away from their headlines when they realise that they're not able to pay for the promises they're putting forward. We are doing this very careful, deep thinking about the issues facing our country, such as, for example, the ballooning benefits bill. We were the only party after the budget to come out against Rachel Reeves' decision to scrap the 2-child benefit cap. I don't quite know where Reform have got to on this.
You just basically call them snake oil salesmen. Let's talk to Robert Jenrick about that.
I'm saying across the board, I think there are people who are making promises in politics that they do not back up with how they're going to pay for it and deliver it.
What do you say to that, Robert Jenrick?
Well, look, Victoria talked about Lincolnshire. We've just seen almost every seat in the formerly Conservative-controlled North East Lincolnshire Council go Reform. We've seen Reform win council seats in the city of Lincoln. I think the Conservatives won none. So you can see that where there have been Reform councils, people like what they see and they want a piece of it. But nationally, look, this is a truly historic morning. We are seeing the complete rejection of the two old parties, and for good reason. People felt that the Tory party, of which I was a part, and the Labour Party have failed
important part,
in different ways. The Conservatives failed because they promised secure borders and a strong economy. Actually, They delivered, we delivered, open season on the borders and stagnating economic growth back home. Labour promised change, and it's just been more of the same. And I think what you've seen across the country, will see with the results that will come in today, is millions and millions of people who've had enough. They want change. They see in Nigel Farage a strong leader with a team who are able, in fact, the only team that are able to actually deliver that real change and get behind it. And we are honoured to be entrusted with the votes of people all over the country. And Reform is emerging today as the only truly national party in this country.
Is that true,
the
Victoria?
only party that can unite the country.
Absolutely not. And Robert and I haven't actually spoken to each other since I supported his leadership. So I'm surprised that he's so quick to can all of the work that he did when he was in government as immigration minister, but also the work that we were trying to do since the general election in order to rebuild. Because we know that mistakes were made in government. Rob was part of the team that made those mistakes. And we are, unlike others, we are fully acknowledging those mistakes. And we're saying, look, we under Kemi have got a new direction. We're doing some very important, fresh, deep thinking about the issues, such as, for example, what we do to make savings in welfare so that we are able to not just drastically reduce our deficit, but also to incorporate policies to grow our economy. And we've seen with Labour, it's been a disastrous night for Labour, but we have seen time and time again these U-turns that have been secured in Parliament have been secured because we Conservatives have led the campaign in Parliament against them. The welfare, the winter fuel payment being an example, the social media ban for children under 16. Reform don't agree with this at all. The family farm tax, I led the campaign on that in Parliament, forcing Labour MPs to vote with the enormous support of farmers, obviously marching outside Westminster. Reform is nowhere to be seen in Parliament.
If the Conservative spokesperson today is coming on to say that this is a great success, and that all the work that they've been doing in Parliament has paid dividends, then I'm afraid
in terms of U-turns.
You need to give your head a shake. What's actually happened here is, unfortunately, for the Conservatives, and I was a part of the party, as you know, for a long time, the trust is completely and utterly gone. People do not want a return of the Conservative Party. It is a dead party. It is only going to exist in pockets of enormous affluence in places like central London. It will be, I think, by the end of this weekend, the party of Kensington and bits of Wandsworth, not
Harlow,
of Newark or
Bexley.
Louth, not of the Midlands and the North, not even of rural Essex.
The Conservatives have held on in Bexley. That was one of your targets.
That was your number one target in London.
It was not.
Harlow.
Havering, which we've just won.
But it was one of them. Bexley was one of them,
Scraped
wasn't it?
home in Bexley. But look, if the Conservative Party is basically a regional pressure group for affluent bits of London, that's not a national party. And the point is this. If you want to get rid of Labour and you want to have real change in this country, it is now obvious for everyone to see that you have to rally behind Nigel Farage and Reform. There is no viable path whatsoever to the Conservative Party winning the next general election. And people are coming to Reform because of that, who are lifelong Labour voters in places like Wigan, where we just won 24 out of 25 seats, lifelong Tory voters in places like Hampshire or Essex. It's not about left or right anymore. It's about, do you want to fix this country?
I thought you
and
said
put it
you
on a
don't
better
want
path?
more Conservatives to join Reform.
We want Conservative voters. We want Conservative voters, absolutely. And we're welcoming them. Millions of Conservative voters and millions of Labour voters. That's the extraordinary thing you've already seen in these results. A town, like Newcastle-under-Lyme, where there's a strong Labour heritage, at times Conservative. You've got people, who maybe have always voted Labour, coming to Reform for the very first time.
And
you're going
on
to
the
see that the
doorstep-
same in places which have always voted
Because
Conservative.
I've campaigned across the country in the run-up to these to yesterday. We had time and time again people asking me straight, how do we vote to stop Reform?
Well, that hasn't happened, Victoria. I mean, that's a pipe dream, but it's not happened, has it? Clearly, millions of people have voted for Reform.
And this is, I think, something we are going to see more and more of, because people are recognising, and we see it in Lincolnshire County Council. They promised that they would cut taxes. They've raised taxes. And
Well, hang on,
people are seeing
Lincolnshire
the
County Council
services,
have raised taxes less than the former Conservative administration
the
did.
services that, well, Worcestershire County Council, they've raised it by the highest amount in
Because
England,
the
9%.
Conservatives left it bankrupt.
Oh,
and Victoria, if things were so bad in Worcestershire, for example, why has Reform just won all the seats that were available on Redditch Council in Worcestershire? It's obvious that people obviously do like what they're seeing from Reform in local government, and they want a piece of it.
So Reform have now just gone, I mean, let's look at the latest figures. There are 400 seats now for Reform, and you started with 2. A dead party, that's what Robert Jenrick's just said.
I do not agree. And what is more, we have seen success, not just in places like Bexley, but also in Harlow. Reform very confidently asserted they would win all 11 seats in Harlow. In fact, the Conservatives won them all.
Can I just ask you, I mean, you pointed out that you two worked very, very closely together for quite some time, didn't you? This is the first time that we have you reunited. This is the first time you've spoken, sitting here.
Rob has not spoken to me since he left the Conservative Party in the way that he did, and I considered us to be very good friends. And so it has been a great personal loss for me as well as a professional one. And the reason I raise this is because I think Rob is describing, he's the economic spokesman for Reform. And I think how one conducts oneself is important. And I think that this is a message that will continue until the general election, that if people are asking the voters for trust, then that has to be genuine. And we as Conservatives are trying to trust, we're trying to rebuild that trust. We are acknowledging that mistakes were made.
What would you say to that?
The way you have trust in politics is to do what you say you're going to do. And the Conservative Party is not trusted because it didn't do what it said it was going to do. It was elected in 2019 on a manifesto.
I'm talking about the personal point.
But this is the point here.
Can we just start there?
The question at the end of the day in politics,
it's actually a very personal
the
point.
question is about honesty and trustworthiness. And the point is this: Reform can be trusted to do what it says it's going to do. Unfortunately, and it gives me no pleasure to say this, the Conservative Party broke the most fundamental trust with the British public because it said it was going to secure our borders. It did the opposite. It was open season. It said it would secure our economy, and I brought it down and then resigned because I was so appalled by what I'd seen and the refusal of the then Prime Minister to do what was necessary. So the point is, Reform is succeeding because the public want change. They're not going to get change from the old parties.
Can I just ask you on a very personal level, because Victoria Atkins has made very personal points about how closely you work, and this is the first time that you've sat together.
Sophie, I don't personalise things. Other people say things. I see it all the time. There are, chemies obsessed with what I did or didn't do.
So you've just moved on.
I am not that's not the way I conduct myself. What I'm interested in is the country. I want the country to succeed.
But the country needs to be able to trust
many millions of people across the country who are seeing in these elections feel angry and frustrated by the state of things. They see their wages stagnating, their energy bills are going up, they can't afford to fill up their car with fuel at the forecourt. They're sick of the farce of small boats. And the Conservatives made a mess of these things. Labour are making them worse. And that is why they're coming to Reform, because they can see that this is the last chance for the country to fix things.
You say trust is important, but isn't trust in character important?
Yes.
So Vicky campaigned for you in your 2014 by-election in Newark. I remember that. She supported your leadership in 2024. And the criticism from people like Vicky in the Shadow Cabinet is that you were sitting in Shadow Cabinet meetings, sort of taking notes, and when you did your big Reform announcement, out you came with those private Shadow Cabinet discussions. That's about trusting character.
I have been very clear for a very long time. I campaigned to change our immigration laws under Rishi Sunak, then resigned from Cabinet when he wouldn't do what was necessary. I then voted against the Conservative government at the time with a small band of people, most of whom have joined Reform. I then stood for the leadership of the Conservative Party. Let me finish my point, Victoria, if I may. I then stood for the leadership of the Conservative Party, saying it had to fundamentally change, to admit the mistakes it had made, be a different party. It wasn't prepared to do that. And that's why I chose to leave.
You were a cabinet
and the most
minister.
important thing in politics is to be honest with the public. And being honest means saying what needs to be done and actually doing it. Not saying, oh, a sham scheme like Rwanda, or pretending that you'd leave the ECHR when you never would do. People know with Nigel that they're going to get a strong leader who has conviction, who's been consistent on the big issues facing this country for decades, my whole adult lifetime, and the team around him is totally united by a desire to fix the country. That's why people are voting for us.
You were a cabinet minister that signed off the immigration policies of Boris Johnson. That is a fact, Rob. And so
I resigned from the government, Victoria. Look, we can argue over the past if you want to. I don't get into that kind of thing. The important thing is what we're seeing today.
Trust is important.
Right, I'm just going to pause you there because as we leave, Wales is going to leave our coverage and join their own coverage in a moment. But we will just have an upsum of what is going on so far. So we've got 46 councils which have declared, 90 to go, and 1,161 seats which have already been declared, and Reform has already passed the 400 mark. Let's bring in Daisy Cooper, who is the deputy leader of the Liberal Democrats. I mean, interesting what we're seeing here. I mean, it really is the fracturing of our political landscape as we know it in so many senses.
Well, I mean, I feel like I'm sitting in on a marriage counselling session of the right wing of British politics. It's very peculiar to watch and listen to, quite frankly. But what it does show is that, you know, Reform UK is peddling a really distinct form of divisive politics, and the Conservative Party are chasing them in that direction. And as a result, there is a very distinctive political space for us Liberal Democrats, and we are determined to fill it. I believe we are now the only party in British politics that can truly say that we are pro-European and internationalist, we are pro-business, and we care about fiscal responsibility. I think every other political party falls down. What we can see in these elections, there is a breakdown of party loyalty. We are now seeing a five-party system, but that five-party system will have to express itself through first past the post, which is not designed.
Which may not benefit you either. I mean, that's the problem.
I don't think we'll be able to see. I think what it will do is produce a whole load of really peculiar, unusual, unexpected results over the coming years. But what I can tell you is there is a distinctive political space. We Liberal Democrats are determined to fill that space. And what we can see in these local elections is that we are expanding our footprint in the areas where we've already won in a general election, and we're building our footprint ready for the next general election too. And the results that have come in already this evening bode really well for that. And we haven't even had our best results yet.
So we're getting more going to come in. Right, we're going to have to leave it there because we're going to go to Kirsty Walk in Edinburgh. Kirsty.
Well, here at Holyrood, we are still awaiting our first results, which will come around 1 o'clock, but plenty actually to chew over right now with the political commentator and broadcaster Brian Taylor and Emily Gray, the Managing Director Scotland of Ipsos. Brian Taylor, you heard from Henry Zeffman outside Downing Street, anonymous of course, but from one Conservative MP, the death of the Labour Party if Keir Starmer stays. Now, this is also impacting on what's happening here, because Anas Sarwar thought that Keir Starmer would be harmful to the campaign in Scotland.
Yeah, I mean, the Scottish Parliament behind us here is in charge for Scotland of devolved areas, justice, education, health, etc. Yeah. But for Anas Sarwar, the leader of Scottish Labour, he could not get away from the fact that the shadow, the Banquo shadow, if you like, of the Prime Minister was hanging over this election, which he wanted to be about Scottish matters. Now, overnight we heard from Henry Zeffman, where people either anonymously or directly are saying the Prime Minister should stand down. Anas Sarwar got in ahead of the game. He disowned the Prime Minister right at the start of this campaign. Why? Because he and his Labour colleagues were going round the doorsteps in Scotland and they were getting people saying to them, we cannot vote for you because we feel betrayed by Keir Starmer, we feel betrayed by the UK Labour Party, we feel betrayed by the UK government. Anas Sarwar quickly realised that he had to get that off the agenda, get that off the table, to avoid it being a referendum upon Keir Starmer and try and make it a referendum upon John Swinney, who's the First Minister in the building behind us there.
Because what happened was then that actually the shortcomings of the SNP performance over 19 years in power, issues like the NHS, issues like education were only secondary.
Is the SNP a popular government here in Scotland? No, they're not. They have faced very, very tough questions. Yes. Indeed, they lost, the SNP as a party lost very, very substantial ground at the UK general election in 2024. Are they popular? No, they're not. But their rivals are even more unpopular.
I was about to say, we'll talk to Alex Massey in a minute.
And John Swinney has the support on the trust. What he's done, he's turned it round. He said, focus upon the changes, the improvements we're making in the health service. OK, it's not wonderful, but it's better. And right towards the end of the campaign, he was talking about trust my experience, trust my leadership. And Anas Sarwar has not been able to counter that, and he's not been able to get that the monkey off his back, if you like, of the UK Labour government.
Emily, let's talk about that in terms of performance. But first of all, tell me what you think is the strength of the Reform vote and why is it not as strong as England? but actually, where could it really hit?
Well, look, Reform UK are the big unknown, actually, at this Scottish election. Of course, they've never had an MSP elected to Holyrood before. This time, they could even be the second largest party at Holyrood, replacing the Conservatives, who took that spot back in 2021. What we've been seeing in the polls is that Reform UK's support actually looks the firmest of any of the parties in Scotland. So 83% of their voters said that they had definitely decided to vote for the party. That's what they've been telling pollsters. And we know that Reform draw their support particularly from older voters and from men. And of course, in a lower turnout election, those could be among the groups most likely to turn out.
And we should say that turnout is low to mid 50s, which is the kind of regular. The outlier last time in 2021 was over 63%. But in terms of trust, where are people putting their trust in Scotland?
Well, the SNP are still the most trusted party across pretty much all the issues that matter to voters at this election. So on the NHS, on the cost of living, all of this. But I think what's really striking is that around 1 in 5 in Scotland say that they don't trust any of the parties to do that. That's a big shift, so that kind of decline in trust. And the exception is actually on immigration. So that's around the third most important issue at this election. But 1 in 5 say they trust Reform, 1 in 5 the SNP, 1 in 5 no one at all.
Thank you very much, Emily. Now, Brian, on the issues in the election, yes, it was cost of living,
yes,
and it was education and it was health. The issue of independence was not top line. But that has actually been John Swinney's big pitch. That if he reached 65, either on their own or with the Greens, the first thing they will do is try and move towards some kind of legislation which they can't do themselves. It's Section 30 at Westminster for independence.
This isn't politics. This is arithmetic for John Swinney. Of course, it's passion. It's his desire. He yearns for an independent Scottish Parliament. But this isn't politics. This is arithmetic. If the SNP are in the mid-30s in the polls, independence is in 50, 51, 52.
Yeah.
So what he's trying to do is to get those who support independence to row in behind the principal party of independence, which is undoubtedly his. John Swinney fought 3 topics during the campaign. Reform the NHS, tackle the cost of living, and what he called the fresh start with independence. Has that fresh start with independence, it just has not been an energetic topic in the campaign, except for the Tories, who tried to polarise the debate by saying this is a serious threat. John Swinney would call it a promise, a serious threat of an independence referendum. The only way to preempt that is to vote, guess what, Conservative. So they tried to polarise the debate with, I would say, relatively limited success.
And we're joined now also by Alex Massey, the Scotland editor of The Times. Alex, when you wrote that the SNP were the kind of least bad option for a lot of people, I mean, this is an election in which, politicians are actually hardly trusted at all by a lot of the electorate, and the incumbents after 19 years, you think, are perhaps the least bad option.
Yeah, I think that's the general view of the electorate. And one has to acknowledge that 2 things can be true simultaneously. The first is that it is a remarkable achievement for the SNP to win another term in office after almost 2 decades in power, and all the expectations are. It would be an astonishing shock if the SNP are not, by some distance, the largest party. Whether they get an overall majority and so on remains to be seen, and so on, the odds are probably against that. So that is a remarkable achievement. At the same time, however, at the last Scottish parliamentary elections, the SNP won 48% of the vote. Nobody's expecting them to win much more than around, say, 35% this time. So they will have lost, a quarter of their vote. And that is, I think, a demonstration of the fact that people are tired of the SNP government. As Brian was correctly saying earlier, that the most voters in Scotland do not actually have a favourable view of John Swinney or the SNP, but they are, the SNP's great advantage in this election is that they can play to the advantages of incumbency in certain areas where that suits them.
And the trust in Swinney, actually.
Yeah, and in Swinney, yes, and they can also be the opposition party because they are not the Conservatives, they are not Labour. So that they can play both sides of the house in that sense.
And Kirsty, what the SNP do, what they have always done, their founding promise, is that they will always stand up, as they see it, for the interests of the people of Scotland. And they say that their rivals, to some extent, to varying extents, are always glancing over their shoulder at the UK colleagues and the UK
But
Parliament.
are they the party of the establishment?
Well, that's
or are the insurgents still after all this time?
That's really intriguing.
Both is the thing. That's the thing. Yeah, that's the thing. They are the establishment and the opposition simultaneously, and so on. And that is a very cute position and an advantageous position for any political party. There is a sort of structural, architectural advantage for the SNP in terms of the devolution settlement.
But here we're in a situation where they can bang on as much as they want, but the problem for them is that there is no legal way at the moment, if Westminster does not grant a Section 30, that they can go for a second referendum.
No, I mean, well, because I mean, it's quite clear that the people of Scotland are not actually thirsting to reopen the constitutional box. You know, it suits the SNP to put independence at the forefront of their campaign as a mobilising factor for their core vote, just as it suits the Conservatives, obviously, for the same reasons, want to mobilise their core vote. But it's all pretend. It's you know, nobody expects anything to come of this and so on. It's a sort of Potemkin campaign.
Let's look very briefly, because of course we are going to be speaking to Ruth Davidson in a little while. Let's look at the potential collapse of the Conservatives, fourth out of fifth. Now, you know, under Ruth Davidson, the Conservatives did well, and now they could be what? Seven.
It's because Ruth Davidson contrived to do what they have tried to do in this election. She managed to corral the pro-union vote into her camp, just as the SNP corral the independence. The question of independence, the question of Scotland's constitutional future, is the dividing fundamental fault line in Scottish politics. It often determines where people place themselves, regardless of their views upon other political matters and other policy matters. Ruth Davidson successfully corralled the pro-union votes into her side in contradistinction to the SNP. Right now, the Tories tried to do this in this election. They're not getting a hearing for that. They are not getting a hearing for that argument at all.
And now we can actually be joined by Ruth Davidson. Ruth Davidson, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Sally. What a big build-up from Brian there.
Sally. Yeah, you got a big build-up, but actually what would be suggested is actually you should just remained at the Parliament in Scotland rather than hightailing it to the Lords. The Conservatives would be doing a lot better today if you had.
Well, I think the point that Brian was actually making was that the big election in 2016, so a couple of years after the referendum, where we put on all those seats, we went from 15 to 31, so we more than doubled our votes, we more than doubled our seats, was largely because we'd managed to get people who perhaps at heart didn't think they were Conservatives or Tories really, but they wanted somebody that was going to stand up to the SNP and do it strongly and say, look, we had a referendum, let's respect that result. You don't get to rerun it every time you have an election and rerun it at will. And I think what we're probably seeing at this election, and you know, we haven't got the results back in, so this is all a bit of reading of the tea leaves, is that we'll sort of go back almost to the mean that we had before, which is, you know, for the 4 elections prior to that one in Scotland, we got between 19 and 15 seats. And although the polls showed us a bit lower than that, I actually think that's probably where we're going to end up again today.
Let's talk about your brand of conservatism, because essentially what you could be saying is actually that Kemi Badenoch's brand of conservatism isn't working in Scotland. You've been very critical of Kemi Badenoch, and she snapped right back at you because you founded Prospect UK, which I might say are the kind of new wets. There's you, David
Prosper UK. Prospect is a trade union, but Prosper UK. So because we want the UK to prosper. But thank you for letting me say the name over and over again, because it'll get it in people's minds. Prosper UK. That's right.
Yes, but you were. But what you avow has been disavowed by Kemi Badenoch.
Well, I think what we're going to see at the end of the day in the elections here, yes, you know, we took an absolute thumping in 2024. Kemi's come in. She's tried to pick the party back up off the canvas. You have people like Nigel Farage saying that, you know, the corpse can't be resuscitated. We've ceased to be a national party. That will not be true. And she should get the credit for what she's done. But what we think that the next stage of that is, and the pivot should be, is that we should start to look at those people that have left us to our left as well as those that have left us to the right. And she's done a good job going after that. But there's so many millions that have gone from our party to vote Labour, to vote Lib Dem, or to not vote at all.
You actually said there are about 7 million, and you know you've ceded the centre ground, and that's fair enough. Certainly in Scotland done that, because you say there's she has, and this was a pretty tough criticism, she has no coherent plan to fix the country. You only launched in January, so I assume you haven't resigned from that position. You said Kemi Badenoch has no coherent plan to fix the country. It couldn't have been more stark.
So to take all those points in order, I didn't say there was 7 million. We spent an awful lot of money going to one of the really gold standard pollsters and evidence finders, More in Common, which the BBC uses, and they found over 7 million people that identify as either centre or centre-right in the country, that says there is no political party that talks for them. Now, that's a huge market. You know, that's a huge amount of people we should be talking to. And in terms of building that plan, you build that over time in opposition. I've been an opposition leader. I know exactly how you have to do that. And you do it not just in constituencies of place, and we've seen advances in Westminster and we've seen it in Wandsworth, which have come through already, and we'll look at the rest of the places when the counts happen. But you also do it in constituencies of purpose. So what is the Conservatives offering for young people at the next election? What's it going to be for pensioners? What's it going to be for public sector workers? What's it going to be for business owners? You have to build that up. So she needs to do that, but she also, for my money, needs to look to her left as well as her right. And that's one of the things that we are hoping that prosper. You've called us a bunch of wets. Fine, we'll take the term, but there's people that we can speak to, maybe with a more authentic voice than she can. And we're wanting to do that, and we want to do that from within the Conservative Party. We're not a set of splitters. We're not Robert Jenrick. We're not going to defect. We want the future success of the party, but this party has only been a success when it's been a broad church, and that includes the centre-right as well as the right.
Thank you very much indeed, Ruth Davidson. In a moment, we're going to go over to the Edinburgh Count for a look at that. But just before we do that, Alex Massey, on that whole question of the Conservatives moving to the left, trimming to the left, is this going to make any odds with the rise of reform?
Well, I mean, I think if you look at it in a broader sense, and so on, you know, the Scottish Parliament has been dominated by the left and the centre-left since its inception in 1999. This election, actually, one of the stories coming out of it and so on, is that the right is probably collectively going to have a better result in this Scottish parliamentary election than it has ever had previously. That is to say, if you take the view that Reform is a right-wing party, obviously add their votes to the Conservatives and so on, the right share of the vote is actually going to be unusually high in Scotland, and that, I think, tells you something.
Well, now let's go over to Lindsay Bewes from the Edinburgh Count.
Hi, Kirsty. Yes, a busy day here in Edinburgh because there are 6 constituencies being counted alongside the Edinburgh and Lothians East regional list. And really, the smaller parties are targeting some of the seats here. The Scottish Liberal Democrats think this is an area where they could do well. They have a few seats here in their sights. But Edinburgh Central is looking like it's going to be a fascinating contest. It is a 3-way split between the SNP. The seat is currently held by Angus Robertson, who is, of course, a prominent figure in the party, a member of John Swinney's cabinet. He is being challenged by the Scottish Greens former co-leader Lorna Slater and by Scottish Labour too. Now, if Angus Robertson was to lose that seat, that could be the most significant loss for the SNP in terms of political figures in this election. The Scottish Greens have been telling us that based on their early sampling of votes, they believe that they are out in front in that race. They are feeling optimistic, they're feeling positive, not just about that seat, but about their chances across the board. Labour as well are telling us that they are in with a shout in that seat, that seat is very much in play for them. And we're being told that at the moment the SNP and Labour are very close in second place based on that very early sampling. I think it's too early for the Greens to get overexcited about that seat, but if they were to win it, then it would be a historic moment for the party because they've never won a constituency seat in a Holyrood election before. We're expecting Lorna Slater, the candidate in that seat, to be here at the count in around about an hour's time.
And Lindsay, as you're saying, it would be historic. Lorna Slater, a former joint leader of the Green Party, a very big blow for the SNP to lose Angus Robertson, if that is the case. But the significance also is that the Greens are standing very few candidates in the constituencies. They're really more dependent on the corrective position on the lists.
That's right, Kirsty. Yes, they're only standing in half a dozen constituencies in this election. They rely usually on the regional lists to get their MSPs elected. They are talking about a strong performance here in Edinburgh, but also a strong performance, they think, in Glasgow as well. They also have their eye on a constituency there. They think they're doing well there. They think turnout for them in both Scotland's main cities has been pretty high. So they're feeling good about their chances. And as you say, if Angus Robertson was to lose the Edinburgh Central seat, then we should highlight that would be him out of Parliament, because he is 4th place on the regional list for the SNP, making it very, very unlikely indeed that he would be elected as a regional list MSP. That would be a significant loss for John Swinney. Angus Robertson, a very senior figure in the party, the director of the SNP's campaign in this election. So that would be a bruising defeat for the SNP.
Lizzie, thank you. Now over to you, Clive.
Yeah, Kirsty, voting going on, votes being counted rather where you are, clearly. It's been a long morning, it's only, what, 2 hours? And votes going on across parts of England as well, and of course here in Wales too. And we could go to the constituency of Casnewydd Islwyn, southeast Wales. Amelia Belli is there for us now in Newport. And this, Amelia, is the seat where the Reform leader Dan Thomas is standing, hoping to get one of the seats on offer there. How's it looking?
Well, for Reform, it's certainly looking competitive, and it seems like the race here is going to be between Reform UK and Plaid Cymru. Now, votes are being counted here at the Newport Velodrome for the constituency of Casnewydd Islwyn. This brings together 3 areas that have traditionally, almost always at every level, voted Labour, from the city of Newport up into the valleys. Islwyn, the former parliamentary seat, of course, of former Labour leader Sir Neil Kinnock. But when I've been talking to Labour sources here on the ground, they say things here are looking very bad for them. The best case scenario is perhaps that they hold on to 1 out of 6 seats for former Government Minister Jane Bryant. This is a world away from 5 years ago, of course, where Labour would have, if the votes applied to this constituency today, would have been head and shoulders above the other parties, Plaid Cymru coming 3rd and Reform non-existent. Now, this time, Reform UK leader Dan Thomas sees this as a top target seat. There are rumours if he does well and they pick up 2 or maybe even 3 seats, we might even see an appearance here later from Nigel Farage. Plaid Cymru are also hoping for 2 or perhaps even 3 seats here. So things are looking really competitive. The race here at the Velodrome is on, and it's going to be one of the first counts to declare. So whatever happens here could set the tone for the rest of the race in Wales.
Indeed, looking forward to the results coming through. Amelia, thank you. Amelia Belli there for us down in Newport. I'm pleased to say that Gawain Towler is here, former head of communications for Reform UK.
Good to be here.
It's good to see you. We're just hearing from Amelia there that things might be shaping up, looking good for you down in Newport. Dan Thomas potentially getting one of those 6 seats on offer.
I think Newport would be, that part of the world is part of the world that we would hope to do well. I think we're going to do well across the whole of Wales, but Cardiff possibly less so, and possibly the northwest in Smon. But in a place like Newport, yes, I've been knocking on doors in Newport and Cardiff and a couple of other places, and clearly there is an appetite for what we have to do, but it's also clear that the disappointment with Labour here in the Senedd and in London is driving votes both towards us and towards Plaid Cymru, without doubt.
Why do you think Reform are doing so well, given that you've been talking a lot on the campaign trail about immigration, and immigration is not actually a devolved issue for
It isn't, but there again, a lot of the other parties are also talking about non-devolved issues, because I think one of the things that people mistake, and it's as true in Wales as it is in Scotland, there has been a myth that the people of Wales and the people of Scotland and the people of England are very, very different from one another. They have exactly the same concerns, and the sanctuary idea, the sanctuary country in Wales, does not go down well particularly. But it's cost of living, it's education, it's healthcare, it is immigration. All these things matter significantly, and they matter in Essex, they matter in Newport, and they matter in Glasgow. People are actually much more similar than I think people give them credit for. There are differences, of course, and Plaid have picked up on that quite significantly, and in Scotland the SNP, but the similarities, I think, outweigh the differences, which is one of the reasons Reform's doing well here, as it is in Scotland.
Let me bring in Dr. Jack Lerner. lecturer in political science at Cardiff University's Wales Governance Centre. We know that the turnout, certainly on the early indications at least, quite high. Could actually break 50%, which would be the first time in
It would be the
ever.
first time, yeah. So the two constituencies which have verified their votes, they know how many votes there are in total. It looks like it's up about 7%, so that would put things, yeah, probably over 50%. And also, given that in the last Westminster election we had here, we actually had a low turnout of about 56% in Wales, you're seeing the turnout of the two converge, and some of that is because this is the most competitive election that we've ever had, but also there is a recognition now that actually this place, the Welsh Government, the issues and policies that it decides have a real important impact on people's lives, and that's cutting through more than before.
But didn't people understand that going back to 1999 and the devolved parliament being created here?
So there was a lot of confusion, basically. Originally, there was not much excitement and enthusiasm about devolution. That's grown over time, but there was still confusion about who controlled what. Less than half of people in Wales, for example, just a few years ago, knew that health was a devolved area, despite it being probably the most significant, well, certainly the most significant spending area for the Welsh Government. But the big change was COVID, when every day, rather than it being Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, as it was then, on the telly telling you where you couldn't go, who you couldn't meet, where you could eat, what you couldn't do, it was Mark Drakeford, the First Minister.
Right.
And we saw a huge growth in awareness of what is devolved here, who the actors were, who the politicians were, and it seems that there's been a change, therefore, in the blame that people attribute to different levels of government.
So people realised then that it was actually Mark Drakeford who was making the decision about how fast you could drive down the road.
Exactly.
And not Westminster.
Exactly, exactly. And, you know, we got some nice survey stats on this, right? Before the pandemic, only about 25% of people in Wales knew who the First Minister was, Mark Drakeford, who's still quite new in the role. But by the end of the pandemic, over 90% did. He was the most well-known politician of any politicians, you know, more well-known than the Prime Minister at the time here in Wales. So that level of cut-through has had a huge, huge impact. And while at the start, Mark Drakeford and Welsh Labour were very, very popular during COVID, towards the end then that started to fall off. So Welsh Labour's troubles started before UK government, before Keir Starmer came in, but Gawain is right, it's accelerated since then as the two kind of work together.
So Gawain, is there a sense then that some people might, and this might be the case with Reform, you can tell me if that's the case, Labour had an excuse for years.
This place has been able to point fingers at Westminster and say, look at those dreadful Tories in Westminster, not our fault, you can't blame us. And now, because there's Labour at both ends of the M4, that becomes much, much harder to do. And I think, as you were just saying about people realising that healthcare is a devolved issue, but Wales is the worst healthcare in the UK. And that's been run by Labour. They're supposed to be the party that cares about healthcare. Well, maybe they don't. And they're getting the blame for that. And so I think part of the reason there's turnout is there's more knowledge of the Senate and what it does and its responsibilities. Also, we want change. And you only get change by voting. And so I think that has had part of the impact on that.
All right. The suggestion is, according to the polls, getting into the final round of voting, that you're leading the way, or might be leading the way, along with Plaid. If you get the majority of seats, are you going to, because you probably won't get an overall majority, are you going to try to rule?
Party would get an overall
That's
majority.
right. Are you going to try to rule as a minority government?
I don't think we'd be able to. I think that what you're much more likely to see is a coalition between Labour and Plaid. It's not like they've never done it before, and their policies are very similar in many ways. What I think is going to be interesting.
So you wouldn't talk to the Conservatives?
What would be the point?
If
we do well, the Conservatives have done very badly indeed. You couldn't add that up together. It was not going to.
You don't think
the numbers don't make that happen?
But if they did make that happen,
then that's a completely different world, and we don't know where that would be completely different. But reality doesn't suggest that's going to be the case. I don't see that happening. A lot of our rise comes not just from Labour, but also from the Tories. We do well, the Tories do badly. So being able to put a coalition together, even if we wanted to, even if the Tories wanted to. And I was, at the weekend, we were told quite categorically that was not the case. And it's not something I'd want to do. But it does mean that we can provide a damn solid, extremely effective opposition in the Senate. And I think that may be where we're at, because I cannot see Labour, the Greens, Plaid, Lib Dems ever countenancing a reform-led government in Wales.
So very, very briefly, Jack, does that suggest then that perhaps Labour could be part of some kind of progressive coalition on the left?
Oh, it might be the case that actually the only way to get to a majority is by adding up Plaid and Labour. What's different is that, yes, they've worked together before, but Labour have never been the junior party.
Nope.
Yes.
And, you know, emotionally for them, psychologically, that is a huge, huge change. So I think whatever happens, you know, it's going to be uncertain, but also an uneasy kind of a working relationship in the future.
All right. Jack, more from you a little bit later. And Gawain Towler, many thanks.
Thank you.
Clive, thank you. Well, let's just bring you up to date with where we are at the moment, because counting, as you know, is continuing throughout the morning. A lot of these counts only started at about 9 o'clock this morning, but we are hoping to get some results soon. But there you are, 402 seats for the Reform Party. The Conservatives have lost 174. Crucially, it's Labour that's down 260 seats. Already, the Lib Dems have made gains, the Greens have made gains. We're also getting some first results from wards in councils that did begin counting first thing this morning. In Suffolk, for example, Reform and the Greens have both made gains from the Conservatives. West Oxfordshire, the Greens and the Lib Dems have both held a seat, but Reform, interestingly, have gained a seat from Labour in Hertfordshire, in Welwyn Hatfield. And we've seen there in one ward the Labour vote completely collapsing. It's gone from 50% to 7%. So these are early results that we're getting from counts that got underway just a short time ago, but we are expecting some results not too far away now. Vicky has been looking at what has been coming in so far and is with us now. Vicky.
Yeah, and Sophie, it's about the collapse of the Labour vote that you've talked about there in some areas, and I want to bring you one of those areas. We're going to look at Greater Manchester. You might understand why, but let's just have a look at Wigan first of all, because this is the point about a third of the seats being up for grabs in some places, not the whole council. So Wigan, it's a Labour hold. They still run the council. Look, they've got 42 seats still. That looks like a very good night, but that doesn't tell the whole story, because look at Reform, 25 seats. And the crucial thing here is looking at the change since 2023. Labour down by 22 seats. That's every single seat they were defending last night, they've lost. And look at Reform, up 24. They've won all of those, plus taken a couple of others. And the reason, of course, Greater Manchester might be significant is because of a certain Andy Burnham. He is the mayor of Greater Manchester. There's a lot of speculation about whether he might return to Westminster. Now, to do that, he would need a seat to fight, wouldn't he? And if you look at some of the figures, you would be wondering what seat that might be in terms of anything that might be a safe Labour area. Another one of those is Tameside. This is another Labour loss, this time to no overall control. But you can see a similar pattern here. Look, 25 seats for Labour, yes, but that does not tell the whole story. They can't run that council anymore. They've lost 16. Reform up 18, the Conservatives down by 2. So again, a real change there for Labour. But it's not just areas like Greater Manchester. It's across, really, England. And that's with not every result in, of course, yet. Let's look at Dudley in the Midlands, because this is a no overall control, a hung council. But look at what's happened here. You've got the Conservatives 27, Reform on 23, Labour on 15. But again, look at the change. Labour down by 13, the Conservatives down as well, but not as much. And Reform UK up by 22. So Nigel Farage's party doing really well there. And look at this vote share, 43% there for Reform UK. But that is telling you here the change as well. Reform taking from both the Conservatives and Labour. So this is again telling us that story about the old two parties, as they are often referred to. They are really being hit there by Reform in lots of areas. And then let's go down to the southwest of England. Let's go down to Plymouth. Completely different area, but a very similar story. This is again a Labour hold in Plymouth, 31 seats. But look, 16 for Reform. Labour losing, Reform up, the Tories losing a few as well. And again, you can see the vote share there. And importantly, looking at the change. You should always look at the change to tell you what is happening. Labour down by 22. Reform UK up by 37, the Tories down by 22. And this is the idea, of course, that because there's only a third of the seats up in lots of areas, Reform can't take a lot of these councils because they're very limited. There's only a third of the seats up for grabs. They will be speculation, of course, that they could be taking a lot more if more of these seats were up for grabs. We're also hearing about the North East, a Reform source there in the North East of England suggesting Sunderland could be very, very bad news for Labour. So again, areas of strength for them is where they're very much being hit. And Sophie, the story in London, we don't have a full picture yet. There's a lot of London still to come. They could be holding up a bit better there, still losing seats, maybe not as many, but they will then be looking very nervously, Labour figures, at what the Greens are doing. But I think you think about people like Lisa Nandy, Angela Rayner, big figures in the party, looking at their area where they represent and seeing that they're being pretty much decimated.
Oh, well, I think we're going to be talking to Steve Reed, another big Labour figure, shortly. But first, let's talk to Professor Sir John Curtice, who is the man who has been following this in great detail all night. The facts, the figures, everything for us. What have you making of it so far?
Well, I think the reason why we are asking ourselves whether Reform will indeed win Barnsley and Sunderland, whether they will indeed win Essex, where we've already got quite a lot of results, is that these are some of the most pro-Leave parts of England. And it's very, very clear from these results that Reform support is primarily concentrated, and their advance in support is primarily concentrated in places that voted for Brexit in 2016. And this is consistent with the evidence of the opinion polls that basically around a half of those people who voted Leave in 2016 are now backing Nigel Farage. And so, although, I mean, a lot of your spokespersons from other parties are saying, well, people are upset and they're unhappy and about the failure to turn around the economy, public service, etc. All of that is true. But as it were, that is the thing that is pushing people away from some of the mainstream parties. But what is attracting them to Reform as well is the fact that they are Brexiteers, that they are more broadly people with a relatively socially conservative outlook. And it's the combination of the two things, being upset, having lost confidence in the traditional mainstream parties, and having sympathy for some of the views and issues that Reform emphasise, that helps to identify Reform voters. Now, I think in truth, I think it's that many of the mainstream parties would go on to say, well, but that is only a section of British society. It's never going to command the kind of 40% support that we've traditionally expected a governing party to command. I suspect that that is true, but in our fragmented politics, as has already been illustrated, 25-26% of the vote across the country can be enough still to put you firmly in first place and therefore potentially in a strong position in the general election, because at the moment Reform are indeed, in the results we've had so far, running at about 26%. In other words, we have to rethink our assumptions about what parties need to achieve and whether or not they need to be broad coalitions as opposed to parties that particularly appeal to a particular section of voters, for so long as we have this fragmented party system.
John, you've been following these elections in so much detail for such a long time. Just give us a sense of how different this is at this moment, the fracturing of the vote that we're seeing.
So I didn't quite catch you.
You've been following this for such a long time, these elections over the years, and you always have huge insight into what's going on. Just give us a sense for you how different this moment could turn out to be.
Well, this is the most consequential, potentially, set of local elections since the local elections of 1982. Now, they took place in the immediate wake of the rise of the Liberal SDP alliance in late 1981, early 1982. And until a few weeks beforehand, there was confident expectation that this would demonstrate that maybe the Liberal SDP alliance could indeed, as they then put it, break the mold of British politics. As it happened, however, Argentina invaded the Falklands a few weeks before the local elections, and that and the way in which the British Army and Navy eventually managed to turn things around helped to improve the then Prime Minister's image, Margaret Thatcher. And although the Liberal SDP alliance did very well by historical standards, they didn't make the breakthrough that they were anticipating. So those were a set of local elections that, like these, could have demonstrated the potential challenge to the two largest parties. But in the end, they also began to indicate that maybe it was at risk of fading. The difference this time, of course, yeah, sure. I mean, Reform, as I said, getting about 26%. The Greens, about 16% on average. These are not large totals, but of course, in combination, it is 42% of the vote. And meanwhile, Conservative and Labour are performing in these elections roughly in accordance with what the opinion polls have been saying, which is they're both struggling to get much above the 20% mark. We do therefore have this unprecedented situation of both political traditional governing parties being in deep, deep trouble, and that they're no longer being attacked from by one party. They're no longer being attacked from the centre, as the Liberal SDP alliance were positioning themselves. They are being attacked by Reform to their right, quote unquote, who are the pro-Brexit party, the concerned about immigration party, the party of people who are not too keen on equalities policies, versus to Labour's left, the Greens, who consist of people who are the very, very opposite views of Reform voters. Again, there also people are upset about how Britain is being governed, but they then answered that question by going to the Greens. So again, it's a combination of ideology and discontent. But it does therefore mean that a fundamental assumption that Labour and the Conservatives have hitherto made, which in the end it's impossible under our electoral system for a party of the so-called far left or far right to be able to thrive in our politics. That assumption is no longer necessarily valid.
Sir John, sorry to interrupt you there, but we can get reaction to what you've just been saying because we are now joined by Labour's Steve Reid, a very senior figure in the party. Deep, deep trouble you're in, says Sir John Curtis.
Well, good morning. Good to be with you. Like, no one is going to pretend these were not a very tough set of election results. They're still coming out now, and they are certainly difficult. And it would be foolish to try and pretend otherwise. I know a lot of councillors across the country, Labour councillors, who will have lost their seats. They've worked really hard for their communities, and my heart goes out to them. But also, every set of elections, and I've been involved in many, at both a local and national level in my lifetime, they always teach you something that you need to know. And I think what we're seeing here, the conversations I've had on the doorsteps, is that the British public want change and they want it to happen faster. Because when they look outside their front door, when they look at their high street, when they look at their hometown, it is not a place that talks to them of the aspirations that they have for themselves and their own community. So they expect to see that change.
That's what you promised when you were elected. It's Nigel Farage now who's saying the public is getting the change that they want. They seem to be voting in large numbers for reform.
Well, I think what Britain needs is change, not reform. And we're less than 2 years into a 5-year term of government. Now, that isn't to try and dismiss what's just happened, but it is to say we're at a certain point in the Parliament. And if you look back to, Tony Blair won that landslide majority in '97. In 1999, he had a very similar set of local election results to this. He won again in 2001, and in 2003, a very similar set of election results to this. Some of the wilder predictions we were having about how many seats Labour was going to lose have been toned down a bit. It's still very, very bad. I'm not pretending otherwise, but this is what happens in a 5-year cycle. And I understand what John was saying about fragmentation into many parties, but I think part of why that's happened is that at this phase in the cycle, the voters would normally vote for the main opposition party in order to signal their displeasure, but the fury with the Conservatives is still so deep. They're not choosing to vote Conservative, so people are voting Reform in some areas, and where Reform is beyond the pale to voters in other areas, they're voting Green or Lib Dem.
We're also seeing the Labour vote collapse in some places, and it's Reform taking those votes. But I mean, we've had one. Henry Zeffman was talking to us from Downing Street a short time ago, our correspondent, and saying that an anonymous Labour MP saying that it's horribly sad, and it probably points to the death of the Labour Party. Do you need a new Prime Minister? Do you need a new leader?
No, we don't. I think we saw what the Tories did. They were in power for 15 years, 14 years. And after 2016, I think we had 9 education secretaries, 7 chancellors of the Exchequer, 5 prime ministers. Doom scrolling through prime ministers doesn't resolve the problem. We have to focus on how we can bring real change you can feel, to towns and communities up and down this country. We don't do it by having psychodramas in Westminster. We do it by focusing squarely on what we need to do to improve the amount of money going into people's pockets, the state of your high street, the look and feel of your street. And that is what this government is focusing on. It's not the grand projets that have failed time after time. It's not, you know, big society, Brexit, levelling up, build back better. They all failed. We need to focus down on what change feels like and looks like in people's hometown. Change they can feel. That is the only way that we can demonstrate to people that they're getting.
You can see, I mean, that MP, as I say, anonymous, I don't know who it is, but quite clearly feels that unless you change the leader, you're not going to get the change that you need ahead of the next general election.
100 of us, so I wouldn't put too much store by that. I've spoken to a lot of my colleagues. Labour is not going to ape what the Conservatives did. If you look, you know, they were unable to grow the economy because they were constantly chopping and changing, and the end result of that was they got their worst result for the 200 years of their party's history. And yesterday, they've gone back even further from that point. They appear to be a dead political party, and their MPs now are just a remnants of the corpse of what was once the most successful party in the Western world. A lot of their vote has gone to Reform. They've been obliterated in Havering, wiped out in Sutton.
Yeah, but we're talking about the Labour. We are obviously talking about the state of your party at the moment, because you are the party in government, and it is your party that is suffering the most so far, and there are still, as I say, many, many more votes to come. And it isn't just a handful of MPs, is it, who feel that a change of leader is what you need. We've heard from councillors as well who've said the same thing.
Well, I've been reading and hearing about these stories in the press for weeks and weeks now, but genuinely, when I speak to my colleagues, the vast majority of us, the overwhelming majority of us, do not want to do anything of the sort. If we were to start having months and months of internal speculation about who should be Prime Minister at a time where we've got a security crisis going on in the world and a cost of living crisis here at home, I think the British public would conclude that we're taken leave of our senses. We need to deliver the change the British people voted for in July 2024, and we are starting to deliver that change. I don't think we've communicated it well enough. I was knocking on the door of many people in my own constituency, but one guy opened the door. He was a pensioner, and he mentioned the changes that we made to winter fuel allowance. That was a mistake. He didn't, though, know that his pension had just gone up by over £500. So I think people have heard some of the negative things. Those mistakes we need to learn from and correct, but people don't know all of the good things that are going on at the same time, and we need to get better at telling a story about the future of this country and people's place in that.
Steve Reed, it's Nick Watt here. You know Keir Starmer really well. You're probably his closest friend in the cabinet. Arguably, you made him Prime Minister. You introduced him to Morgan McSweeney. You went to him in the summer of 2019 and said, how about standing for the leadership of the Labour Party? How is Keir Starmer, how is this going to be playing out in his mind? Because in a sense, we've seen 2 Keir Starmers as leader. One is the fighter. He fights, but then famously after the Hartlepool by-election loss, when they went back on that terrible result in 2019, he almost resigned. How is this playing out in the mind of this Prime Minister you know really well?
Well, you don't need to ask me that, Nick, because the Prime Minister said it himself this morning. He's not walking away. We always knew this was going to be difficult. Whoever was Prime Minister at a time like this, it would be difficult because the circumstances the country has found itself in for years and years now are so tough, and it's going to take time to fix. We all know we need to deliver change people can feel on their front doorstep, in their high street, more money in people's pockets. We're seeing things start to move in the right direction. The war in the Middle East has made things more difficult, so we need to take that into account as we readjust to make sure that we can still focus on delivering the change that people want to see. But the Prime Minister is 100% committed to delivering the promises we were elected on, as am I, as is the whole of Cabinet.
But even from you, closest ally in the Cabinet from the Prime Minister, I'm not hearing Keir Starmer is the greatest possible leader we've got of the Labour Party, and I look forward to him leading us to victory at the next general election. It's things like, it would be a disaster to have a contest.
I'm just going to take you, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Steve Reed. We're just going to go to Hackney because there's a mayoral declaration here, our first one.
20 votes. Tariq, if I could please continue. Tariq Gregg, the Conservative Party candidate, 6,345 votes. Eva Steinhardt, Liberal Democrats, 2,731 votes. Caroline Woodley, Labour and Cooperative Party, 26,865 votes. If I could continue, please. Excuse me, if I could continue. Excuse me, please. Can I continue? Hello? Excuse me, can I continue? The total number of votes cast across Hackney was 76,187. The turnout was 40.98%, and the total number of ballot papers rejected was 513. I do hereby declare that Zoe Garbett is duly elected as the Mayor of Hackney. Thank you.
So those are the scenes in Hackney in North London, and Labour won the 2022 election there with 60% of the vote, but what a turnaround in fortunes for the Green Party's Zoe Garbett. She got 17% back then, but she is now the Green Party's first mayor. She is now the new mayor of Hackney, and here she is.
I just want to start by saying thank you to everyone who made this election run so smoothly. Thanks to Bruce and his team and Dawn for all your leadership. Today, we start the fight back. In this election, over and over, people kept telling me that they felt let down. People kept saying it's hard for me and it's hard for us. Council services are failing those who need them most, and people are struggling to make ends meet. To everyone who voted for me, I truly thank you for putting your trust in me today. I've always stood up against injustice. For over a decade in the NHS, being a councillor in Dalston to sitting on the London Assembly, all the work I've ever done has been to change the system and services that let people down, harm people and widen inequality. Our borough is home to over 250,000 people. So many people are being failed by the government and the systems, whether it's parents, migrants, trans people, disabled people and young people. The list goes on and on. Across London and the country, people have made it clear that they are desperate for an alternative to this failing Labour government. It's not old politics parties versus new parties. This is about a system of fear versus a movement of hope. Hackney voters have said loud and clear that they are sick of politicians putting profit before our planet, and for supporting genocide and letting down so many people who are struggling. From our Latin American community events to walking down our streets to the estate that I live on, I've been in so many beautiful spaces throughout this campaign that show that Hackney rejects hate and division. Hackney has a history of solidarity between the beautiful mixes of people and communities making Hackney our home. Here, people
Garbett, who is the first Green mayor. She's the new mayor of Hackney in North London. Steve Reed is still with us. I mean, this is a Labour stronghold, isn't it? You won very well last time, a huge share of the vote last time, a huge turnaround in fortunes for you now.
Well, congratulations to her, first of all. She's won an election, and now she will be in charge of Hackney Council and running its services, and I wish her well in doing that. All of us do who care about Hackney and the other boroughs across London. But, you know, the Greens have had some pretty strange candidates. In the borough that I used to lead, 2 Green candidates have been arrested for stirring up racial hatred. There's been some pretty strange things going on because, as Zach Polanski has said, he didn't bother to check the backgrounds of some of the people they put forward for election. And whereas, you know, yesterday some of those people were candidates, today some of them will be councillors, so in charge of public resources and decision making.
And yet the voters have still, I mean, and yet the voters have still chosen the Green Party over Labour.
Well, we have to see how that plays out. I don't, you know, Sian Berry, a very senior and respected Green Party figure, has said that there are now questions on the doorsteps about Zach Polanski, and I think the whole issue about some of their candidates has only been running in the media for a little over a week. So maybe there wasn't enough time to properly scrutinise what he was standing for and who his candidates were. But as we've just seen, they're going to run Hackney, so let's see what happens.
But how worried? I mean, this is the first result that we have had in since the count started this morning, and the first big one for the Greens, and there are a lot more to come. London, particularly, these are all-out elections, so all these councils are up for grabs. How worried are you now to see that what has been predicted, what the polls have been saying, may be about to happen, and that is that you are being attacked not just from the right by Reform, but also from the left?
But there were differential results, aren't they? In Merton, Labour increased our majority, and in Hammersmith and Fulham, Labour's majority went up as well. And as I said earlier on, in normal circumstances at this point in the cycle, you would expect disillusioned voters to vote for the main opposition party to register their displeasure. They haven't. They've gone all over the place this time, partly because the Conservative Party remains unelectable. So people are voting elsewhere. But as I said, the Greens now are in charge of Hackney. We will see what they do, but I know from my own borough, where two of their candidates were arrested for stirring up racial hatred, there are some real concerns about some of the people who may now be walking into our town halls and wielding power, and what they might do with that.
But Steve Reed, we were hearing from John Curtis earlier about how today's elections may show that the two-party system of England has come to an end. And when you had that two-party system, you had the broad church of the Labour Party, the broad church of the Conservative Party, and there wasn't a threat to the Conservatives on their right, and there wasn't a threat to Labour on its left. Doesn't today show that result in Hackney? There is a threat to you on the left, but also the other flank, Reform UK.
Well, I mean, Nick, you've been in this a long time, just like I have. In 2019, I think it was, the Brexit Party won the set of European elections that we had. It had no impact on the following general election. I can see that people are angry. People are looking for change to happen faster. It is down to this government to make sure that that is what we deliver. The country is looking for change, not reform. They want to see their high streets improved. They want to see their neighbourhoods stronger. They want to see better public services. I believe that is starting to come. Clearly, the country is impatient for that change to happen faster. We have to listen, we have to learn, and we have to redouble our efforts to deliver the change the British people expect to see.
Steve Reed, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Well, we have heard from many of the party leaders already, starting with the Prime Minister, who came out a couple of hours ago now. He was on a visit to party workers in Ealing in West London, and he acknowledged straight away that it had been a very tough night already for Labour, but he said that he was not going to go anywhere.
Let me be clear, these are really tough results. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And we have lost brilliant Labour representatives, people who put so much into their communities, so much into our party and our movement. And the voters have sent a message about the pace of change, how they want their lives improved. Labour was elected to meet those challenges, and I'm not going to walk away from those challenges and plunge the country into chaos.
The Conservatives are coming back. I promised to renew this party. I said that we were going to rebuild after our worst defeat ever, and we can see those signs of renewal everywhere that we are standing. But I do want to say to those candidates and councillors who stood and who did not win, I am sorry. I wish you were celebrating with us this morning, but I want you to know that this is the beginning. This is not the end. Conservatives are coming back.
I think overall what's happened is a truly historic shift in British politics. We've been so used to thinking about politics in terms of left and right, and yet what Reform are able to do is to win in areas that have always been conservative, but equally we're proving in a big way we can win in areas that Labour have dominated, frankly, since the end of World War I. At the moment, we're winning 1 in 3 of all the seats that are up, but I genuinely think the best is yet to come.
We're on for a historic gains. This would be a record
8th year of consecutive gains in local elections for the Liberal Democrats. That's never been done before, and we've still got great results to come in places like Surrey and Sussex and Huntingdonshire. So yeah, we're feeling very bullish tonight.
So Ed Davey there, rounding off all the thoughts of the leaders we have spoken to already this morning. There is still a long way to go in this, more than 3,700 seats to declare in England alone, and we have had nothing yet from Scotland or from Wales. That should start coming in at around 12:30, 1 o'clock, and obviously crucial results that we are going to get there. You can see on our screens as well that we've got counts across the country. We're across the nations and regions. We've got Sheffield there and Clydebank up on your screens. But let's go to two very interesting ones, Sandwell, which is in the West Midlands, and Sunderland. Now, these are all-out elections, which means they are really up for grabs. Anyone can take them. Rob Mayer is in Sandwell, Richard Moss is in Sunderland, and both of these councils are very much reform targets. Let's start with you, Rob Mayer. What's the mood like there now?
Well, we're just getting the verification process done here in Sandwell. Sandwell itself, a collection of 6 towns just off to the west of Birmingham, places like West Bromwich, like Smethwick, like Tipton, where we are this morning. It is a reform target, but this place has been run by Labour majority control since 1979. We're expecting big changes today. Just been chatting to the Labour leader of the council here. She says her own seat is on an absolute knife edge. She is hopeful of retaining control of the council. But reform, I mean, they're not doing any expectation management at all. They're talking up 40 or 50 seats and taking overall control of the council. I've just spoken to the Greens here, pretty pessimistic about their own chances, but suggesting Reform UK could take 60 of the 72 seats, which would be an absolutely extraordinary result. This is an area where around 60% of people voted for Brexit, and there does seem to be that link between those Brexit votes and a vote for Reform UK. And the Labour Party saying what really came up on the doorstep wasn't so much the leadership of Keir Starmer, but immigration. And the Labour leader of the council here has told me the National Party has got to get its house in order on immigration, shout about, in her words, the good work that she says the party is doing, but really get the message out there, because it isn't being received on the doorstep in places like Smethwick, West Bromwich and Tipton. A long way to go before we get the final results here, but we are expecting big Reform UK gains from Labour.
So big changes expected in Sandwell. What about Sunderland, Richard Moss?
Well, Sophie, it's a very similar story here. Labour have held control of this council since 1974, since it was formed. They've never really faced a threat, but this is a very big one. In fact, Labour probably gave up some time ago on the idea they were going to retain control here. It was how many councillors they would have left. They tried to sell a message of local regeneration, which is undeniably happening in the city centre here, but feel it was drowned out on the doorstep by the unpopularity of the Prime Minister, concerns about cost of living, and national factors that they don't believe they could control. And the result is that certainly sources in Reform UK are talking up their chances of taking control here, but also the possibility that Labour, that started this day with 49 councillors in Sunderland, could end up with a single-figure number of councillors. One Reform UK source even told me they might be able to fit in a taxi. Now, if that is the case, and we haven't had any declarations yet, we're not expecting any until lunchtime, then that is a pretty devastating situation for a city that Labour had relied on, has 3 Labour MPs here, including the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson. And the fallout from losing places like this so badly will obviously reverberate.
Fascinating. Well, there's the latest updates from Sunderland, from Sandwell, where, as I said, they are all-out elections. So very much up for grabs. And by the sounds of it, we could be about to see big changes. Let's have a look at some more results that we've had already. Vicky has been going through them.
Yeah, just a very quick result for you that we have just had in. Now, this is Gosport, which is down here in Hampshire, just right next to Portsmouth. It's a hung council, so no one party has won this, but the detail is interesting. So the Conservatives on 11, Reform UK on 10, the Liberal Democrats on 6 now. Portsmouth in this area has quite often been, pretty good for the Liberal Democrats. But look at the change since 2022. So the Conservatives have lost 1 seat. Again, it's Reform UK up by 9 seats on this council. And this time, the Liberal Democrats are losing out. They have lost 7 of their councillors there, something they'll be very disappointed about. And of course, what is interesting, we were talking earlier about where Reform are doing well. I mean, they're doing well in lots of places across England, as Richard was saying, from up there in Sunderland, through the Midlands, parts of Greater Manchester, now looking down here at the south coast of England. And as John Curtice was saying, partly this is to do with the Brexit vote. Gosport is an area where people voted for Brexit, and that seems to be something that is continuing to give success for Reform UK, wherever, Sophie, it is actually. So they're going to be delighted by this, and I'm sure Reform will be saying that they are the only party really that is nationally performing well everywhere across England. But, as John said there, it is still quite linked to the Brexit vote.
Absolutely. Nick, it's interesting the energy that we're seeing behind Reform in these early stages.
Yes, and I mean, we talk about one nation conservatism. You saw Vicky Atkins, she sort of embodies that, which is that you don't want to have 2 nations of the poor and the rich, and you want to appeal across the country. But what is the party that now appears to be looking like a one-nation party? It's Reform UK. Those successes that Vicky has been talking about across England, we haven't heard from Wales yet, but all the assumption is that Reform UK are going to do well in Wales and that they're going to have a significant presence in the Scottish Parliament. So in other words, in the 3 nations that are voting today, there's one party that is performing well across all those 3 nations, it would appear.
It's interesting though, because these are people who have not been in power. We've got, even now already, we've got a whole lot of councils. They only had 2 councillors before, and all of a sudden we have swathes of, what is it, more than 400 Reform councillors who have not been in power so far.
A start-up party that barely existed, but not a start-up leader. Nigel Farage has been around for quite a long time. I've known him for 25 years, way back in those days of UKIP, and then it was the Brexit Party, and now Reform UK. And extraordinary, all those times it took him to get into Parliament, only got in 2024. But it has to be said, this is a leader who has made the weather. Would there have been a Brexit referendum without UKIP's successes in 2 successive European parliamentary elections? That is a big debate. And now here, Nigel Farage is shaking up the post-Brexit landscape. And as John Curtice was saying, potentially meaning that England is finally going to catch up with Scotland and Wales, who got there way before England, which is multi-party politics and how that works out. And as we were saying, under the sort of first-past-the-post 2-party system, you have these broad churches, Labour and the Conservatives, no room on either side of them. Well, it looks like Reform is on both sides of both of those 2 parties.
And we haven't had the results yet from Scotland or Wales, any of them at all. But some people are going to watch this and wonder, we've seen local elections in the past, and we've seen local elections being protest votes, and it's not how people then go on to vote in the general election. It feels slightly less known now how that will play out.
Yes, and it is interesting. What Labour people were attempting to say last night is, well, I know these English locals aren't good for the Labour Party, but do you remember 1999 where Tony Blair did very badly and he won the general election 2 years later? But that was completely different. There were basically 2 main parties and the Liberal Democrats. Now it is this fractured landscape and this start-up party with a veteran leader just remaking it.
Well, let's go to Kirsty Wark now, who's in Edinburgh. It can't be that long before we get results coming through, and that is going to be absolutely fascinating, isn't it, Kirsty?
There's a lot of things that are going to be fascinating. Yes, we are looking ahead to our first result, which is going to come extremely soon, but also we hear from John Curtice that the turnout might be as high as 60%. Now, normally it's in the low 50s. There was an outlier last time in 2021 of 63, but 60 favours the insurgents. So let's just see what is going to be happening about that. But before we do that, we are joined by our Scotland editor, James Cook, who has news, potentially.
Well, a couple of things, Kirsty. Hello, first of all. Hello. We're early stages, but a senior Scottish National Party source has said to me, John Swinney, having spent a lot of the campaign, the SNP leader, talking up the prospect of winning an outright majority,
Yes.
65 seats here, very difficult because of the electoral system and unusual. Minority or coalition government is the norm here, as you know. But the source says a majority is now regarded in senior SNP circles as possible but improbable. Now, you might argue that was the case throughout the campaign, but I think the fact that they're using the word improbable at this stage tells you something before we've even had a result, that they do not think they're going to get there. One other piece of news related to that, another senior SNP source is suggesting very strongly to me that they believe that Angus Robertson, the Culture Secretary, a very senior figure in the SNP, is going to lose his seat in Edinburgh Central to the Greens, which speaks to what you were saying about turnout favouring the insurgent, Kirsty, because the Greens seem to be doing well in Edinburgh, parts of Edinburgh and also parts of Glasgow.
But what that also means is that Angus Robertson is very definitely out because he is down at 4th or 5th on the list for the SNP. So that is a very big blow for the SNP. Now,
if that comes to
pass. That comes to pass. Now, this is all ifs, ifs, ifs. Now, let's just have a quick look at if in terms of reform and a constituency seat. What the talk is that if they're going to win something, it will be the most Brexit seat in Scotland. And that is Banff and Buchan, and that would be pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, Alex Salmond's old seat, Banffshire and Buchan Coast, slightly renamed now, but yes, exactly, that seat in the northeast, fishing heartlands, a seat where a lot of people supported Brexit, particularly some fishermen who thought it would make life better for them, and some of whom I've spoken to and said they were pretty disappointed by what Brexit led to in terms of the opportunities for the fishing industry. I should say as well that it's not by any means a given that they're going to win a constituency seat reform. They might take that seat. There was some indications I heard from senior Labour sources in the past few days that they thought Reform were doing pretty well in some parts of Fife. Other people not so sure about that. And there was a poll, a more in common poll, just in the past few days, suggesting there were other seats that they might be doing well in, possibly Bathgate, possibly Ayr. So we don't know, but I think even if they don't win a constituency seat, the polls do seem to suggest that they'll pick up quite a bit on the regional list, the second vote.
Well, let's now turn to John Curtis, because John, you were obviously author of that thought that actually turnout in Scotland is near 60%.
Can I immediately update you, Kirsty, because since we sent that note around, we now think the turnout is looking more like 55%, and that therefore it's going to fall back to the kind of level that it was in 2016. And the apparent boost to turnout that occurred in 2021, perhaps because of the prominence of the devolved institutions during the COVID pandemic, that has now worn off. Now, that does therefore mean that Scotland is looking to be different from both Wales and certainly England. In both cases, turnout has risen from, of course, a relatively low level. Now Scotland seems to be falling back a bit from what was a particularly high level.
And I think you might have heard James Cook say there that the indications are that in Edinburgh Central, one of the most senior figures in the SNP, Angus Robertson, is likely to come third, and the winner is likely, but we can't even talk about whether it's possibly going to be Lorna Slater, who was previously a joint leader of the Green Party. Now, that would be an insurgent victory if that was the truth.
It would indeed. It is, of course, a constituency, together with one of the central Glasgow constituencies, has a lot of relatively young people, lots of university graduates, just the kinds of people who are inclined to vote Green, not just in Scotland, but throughout the UK. So I think it always looked like one of their best chances. But it was certainly what is true. The SNP cannot afford to lose Edinburgh Central if they're going to get to 65. And if indeed we get that result early, we will kind of almost know straight away that that particular game is over.
OK, very quickly on this, John, what we haven't talked about this morning is that in Wales and Scotland, people can vote from the age of 16, which they can't do in England. Also in Scotland, there was 4.3 million registered to vote. Do either of these things have an impact, do you think, ultimately, on a result?
No, because there aren't enough 16 and 17-year-olds to have much impact. So, for example, the decision of the UK government to, in fact, eventually enfranchise 16-year-olds across the whole of the UK is going to add about 2.5% of names to the electoral register. You may remember, Kirsty, actually we had this whole argument when 16-year-olds were first allowed to vote. That was in the independence referendum of 2014. And at that time, I gently pointed out that there just weren't enough of them to be decisive. But of course, certainly insofar as the Greens do well amongst younger people, they're also so do the SNP. You can see why the Greens would not be unhappy about the fact that 16 and 17-year-olds can now vote.
John, thank you.
Have had our second council result, a big one. This is Essex, Conservative since 1973. All change, Vicky.
Certainly is. This is a really significant result for Reform UK, who have taken Essex Council from the Conservatives. And it is worth suggesting here, telling you about how significant it is, as in how much they've won it by already, because look at this. They've only counted 55 of the 78 seats that are declared, but already Reform have managed to get to the point where they can control the council. So look, 39 seats they've got. The Tories at the moment at 8, the Lib Dems at 3. So this is the change. And just to reiterate, they have not finished counting here yet. The change since 2021, Reform are up by 39 seats. The Conservatives down by 30. They've been decimated here in Essex. Significant area because Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative leader, has her seat here. So does Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK. And look at the vote share. Reform UK 38%, Conservative 25%, the Liberal Democrats at 11%. As I said, they haven't finished counting here yet, but Reform have managed to absolutely trounce the Conservatives here so far, and they'll be hoping to get more seats too.
Vicky, thank you for that. There is a chill wind blowing in off Cardiff Bay here, although the sun is shining, and one suspects that's apt given Labour's fortunes, it would seem, in the elections here. And to discuss that, Baroness Wilcox is with me, former leader of Newport City Council, Labour, of course. It's not looking good, is it?
Mae hi'n dydd trist iawn. It's a very sad day. It's clearly been it will be a difficult result for Welsh Labour. We have to start by respecting the verdict of the voters. You know, democracy has spoken. Many people are telling us that they want politics to feel closer to them, that they want quicker results, and they want that change to happen more quickly. So what we have to do is respect that, respond to it, go away and look very carefully at what people have told us. But I'm going to sound like a bit like a broken record today, Clive, because there's nothing else that I can say. That this is really, you know, not the result that any of us would have wanted, and it doesn't reflect what this place has done under Labour governance since the beginning of devolution.
Did Labour, and we're still waiting for the results, we haven't had a single
but you know, we can read the
result
rooms
yet, but you can read the rooms. Have you taken voters for granted year after year after year? A sense that generations of people will just continue to vote for you because that's what you did?
I can see that that is a valid point, but I personally don't believe that. When I ran a Labour council and when I was running all the Labour councils as leader of the Welsh Local Government Association, which was a cross-party function, which is what we're going to see here now from next week onwards. It's not about taking people for granted. It's about, look, for 14 years, we had to hold up this place with very little funding from Westminster. Now, I've been in Westminster for several years. I have a much better idea of how things operate, and they just weren't sending that money down the road. So in terms of local government, which I know very well, I know how well this place did in protecting local government. I cut £52 million from Newport's budget in 4 years. Huge sums of money for a local authority, which is why things got to the state they did. But we needed to explain that better.
But it doesn't stack up, the money argument, which has been the case from Labour for a long time. We're not getting enough money from Westminster. Report after report after report in the last 2 or 3 years have suggested that the problems with the NHS here in Wales are due to bad management, are due to not enough efficiencies. Educational reports as well, talking about the attainment levels of people in deprived areas here in Wales, children in deprived areas here in Wales, comparatively, say, to parts of England, Sunderland and so on, that have deprived areas too. not as good since COVID, and not necessarily down to money. And isn't the point that voters perhaps have realised that it's not just a problem from Westminster?
I challenge the bad management argument. I don't know if you know, but I was a teacher for 35 years. So I started off in Brixton, came to Nantiglow, Newport, and then Pontypridd. So, you know, I have a wide range of experience. I'm one of the few politicians who did a job outside politics for 35 years. So I taught young people in South Wales and saw how the funding was a massive issue within that. I was also lucky enough to do examining in England, so I had a direct comparison between the funding that was available in parts of English schools compared to Welsh schools. Management, okay, you know, we can agree to disagree on that, but fundamentally, if you haven't got enough money in your purse to pay the milkman, it ain't going to get paid.
Should Keir Starmer stay on as leader?
I thought you were going to ask me that. It's beyond my pay grade. It's my colleagues up the other end in the House of Commons who will be making that decision, the Parliamentary Labour Party. I'm sure everyone's seen his broadcast this morning where he said very clearly that, that he intends to stay on. He's got a whole team of people around him. It's not just him, it's the Cabinet and the collective responsibility therein. As someone who, you know, who's been a leader myself, you do take responsibility, that's your job. But I don't know where the fixation has come on the individual. I
well,
really
Anna
don't.
Sarwar, leader of Labour in Scotland, thinks he should go.
Well, that ended well, didn't it? You know, he came out and made that announcement and looked around and there was nobody behind him.
All right, OK, thank you for that. Let's go to Anthony Slaughter, Welsh Green Party leader in his constituency, Cardiff Penarth. Hello to you. Thanks for being with us. How are you feeling at this stage in the process?
I've just got to the count and I'm feeling incredibly excited, incredibly optimistic. This is an historic moment for the Greens in Wales. We are about to break through and get a Green voice on the Senedd. That will change everything for the people of Wales.
Would you be willing to be part of a coalition or some kind of cohabitation with Plaid Cymru if they ended up becoming the largest party but didn't have an overall majority?
There's been obviously a lot of discussion about this scenario over the last few weeks and weighing up all the possibilities, and finally, in a few hours, we'll actually know what the numbers are. I've been quite clear all along that the Greens' collaboration, cooperation is in our DNA. We will talk to people and work with people on issues where we share common ground. The crises facing us are so urgent that we need to work with like-minded people to solve those. What shape or form that working together takes, we'll have a better idea of that tomorrow when we've seen the numbers, but we're very keen. We're in that Senedd to be a bold voice for the people of Wales and to deliver bold policies for the people of Wales.
Yeah, you could be kingmakers, couldn't you?
It's a word that's bandied around a lot. As Republicans, I feel we had a better word. But yeah, we're aware of the situation and we're looking at every scenario. And like I said, we'll be discussing all this tomorrow when we know what the actual results are.
I mean, how much of the success, if that comes through in Wales, and that's obviously what you're hoping for, do you think that is down to Zach Polanski on a national level?
Zach has been a major force in raising the profile of the Greens, but this was already happening in Wales, especially in Cardiff, a few years before Zach was elected. I mean, we came second in Cardiff South and Penarth in the last general election. First time ever in Wales. We've seen the momentum building then. Then we took a safe Labour council seat in Grangetown in Cardiff. Then Zach comes along and yes, he's turbocharged our messaging. He's a true friend of Wales. He's been down here a lot supporting us. He's obviously a good force for the Greens across these islands, but this was already happening.
And the allegations and the issues over anti-Semitism and so on, do you think that has had any effect on the situation as far as the Green Party is concerned here in Wales?
The allegations of anti-Semitism anywhere in society are serious and deplorable. There's no room for anti-Semitism or Islamophobia in our politics, our culture, or our society. And we will not tolerate it in the Green Party. When cases are raised... OK, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt you, Anthony. We're going to get the first result from Scotland. I think it's the count at Orkney. Here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, I, Oliver David Reid, returning officer for the Orkney Islands constituency, declare that the total number of votes cast across Orkney Islands constituency at the Scottish parliamentary election on 7th of May 2026 was 10,315. The total number of ballot papers rejected was 32. The total number of votes given to each candidate was as follows: Copeland John William, Reform UK, 844. Halcrow Johnston Jamie, Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, 358. Leslie Robert Fraser, Scottish National Party, 1,661. MacLeod Mike, Scottish Labour Party, 199. MacArthur Liam Scott, Scottish Liberal Democrats, 7,221. Therefore, I give public notice that Liam Scott MacArthur is duly elected as the Member of the Scottish Parliament for the Orkney Islands constituency. I would like to congratulate Liam MacArthur on their election and invite him and other candidates to have the opportunity to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Oliver, and to your team, not just today and through the polling yesterday, but in the weeks leading up to the vote. The support they've provided to all of us as candidates and agents has been fantastic.
Well, this is the first result in the Scottish constituencies in Orkney Islands. It's always been a Liberal Democrat stronghold, the safer seat than its sister seat, Shetland Islands. And in fact, that has been won, and we return the Liberal Democrat, Liam MacArthur, who has been incumbent in the seat since 2007. So let's look at that. Liam MacArthur with 7,221, SNP, Robert Leslie far behind with 1,661, and the other three with less than 1,000, right down to Labour with 199. Let's look now at the share of the vote. Let's look at the share of the vote in the Orkney Islands, and we can see that Liberal Democrats with a whopping 70%, the SNP 16, Reform third with 8, Conservatives 3, and Labour trailing far behind with 2%. Let's look at the change now since 2021, and that is the Liberal Democrats up 8%, SNP down 13%, a harbinger of doom elsewhere, and the Reform up 8, Conservatives down 3, and Labour down 3. So there we have it. And so that is our very first constituency result, a hold for the Liberal Democrats. Brian Taylor, this is a famous seat when it was Orkney and Shetland. Joe Grimond, the former Liberal leader, that was his redoubt. This is a very good result in terms of the increase in the Liberal Democrat vote.
It is a tremendous result. Congratulations to Liam MacArthur, extremely well known MSP. He was an MSP, as you say, since 2007. Prior to that, he worked for the coalition government, Liberal Democrats, of course, but most recently he's really become renowned and prominent through trying to take through Parliament and failing only very at the last stage the assisted dying bill, and that brought him to great prominence. He was exhausted by the endeavour, I'm sure, but he's been returned successfully here. Now, let's be clear about one thing. Orkney and Shetland vote in their own way. They're not particularly driven by the Scottish voting pattern. There hasn't been a history, particularly again, of SNP results there, although the SNP are talking a big game about taking Shetland, where the majority, as you said, is much tighter. This is a good result, an increased majority up from 3,869 to 556, so good result for Liam MacArthur. Yeah. Does the SNP decline bode ill for elsewhere? Perhaps, but we shouldn't read too much from Orkney to the mainland.
Thank you, Brian. Now, Sophie.
We are going to go to Yorkshire now, and we're going to talk to John Trickett, the Labour MP for Normanton and Hemsworth in Yorkshire, who has been a Labour MP for very many years now. Good afternoon to you. How are you feeling about the state of your party at this point?
Well, let me say, first of all, I represent a former mining seat. It's been Labour for over 100 years without pause. But it does look as though the voters have gone off to Reform, but we're waiting for the results to come out. And what I would say is that many, many Labour voters that I represent, and I guess through the north of England and elsewhere, feel that the direction which the government's taken has not delivered the change which they thought they'd voted for. They're angry, they're upset, they feel let down, and they've sent us a clear message. The party and the government, including the leadership, must change with immediate effect if we want to recover.
So the Prime Minister must go?
What I would say about the Prime Minister is he has been a problem for us. Now, I've been around a long time, as you've just said. All Labour leaders, and I think probably all party leaders, come in for criticism. But the strongest I've ever known in really a lifetime of being an activist have been reserved for Keir Starmer. It's hard to know exactly what caused it, but I think that the initial decision to take money off pensioners' winter fuel allowance, he was never forgiven for it, or Rachel Reeves either, and the government's never recovered. So what I would say, the message from my constituency is that it's curtains for Keir.
Curtains for Keir. You have been around a very long time, as we were saying. What has changed for the Labour Party for your support? Because as you pointed out at the beginning, you know, you're a mining area, staunch Labour. It's very unusual for you, somebody like you, to be saying that reform of all parties could be taking your votes.
Yes, it's a political earthquake here. But no, I suppose the arguments will be made that it's midterm, people do protests. But I've seen many protests over the years. This is a dramatic moment, I think, across the north of England, probably Wales and Scotland and parts of London too. Look, you know, we can either just proceed as normal, as though nothing's changed, or else we can accept and listen to what people have told us. They want a system which works for ordinary working people who are struggling to get by. They want schools which are well provided for and hospitals where you don't have to wait for too long and GPs who you can get to see. It's not difficult. One of the things that people are saying, though, is he's too busy spending time projecting himself on a world stage to be engaged in what's happening in our country.
So if you say...
So there's a number of different factors. It's complicated, but look, the curtains for Keir is what I've been told, and I think that is where we now are.
And who should replace him then?
Well, I think that what I would like to see, I'd like to see an immediate debate on what's gone wrong, why we've got wrong, and how we can change our policies. And out of that, then, a new leader will emerge. But I think it would be wrong to try to launch somebody's leadership campaign right now. I think Keir needs to go away. He won us an election. We thank him for that. But think very, very carefully about whether he's capable of taking this party and this government forward in a way which allows the changes which our country desperately needs.
How many other Labour MPs are thinking the same way as you and may well be saying the same things as you publicly in the next few hours?
I don't know how many people will go public, but lots of MPs are saying to me that they're devastated by what's happened to their friends and colleagues and comrades, councillors who've served their communities sometimes for decades, worked hard, candidates who are terribly loyal to the place where they live, who've really been left behind, not because of anything that they did, but because of the view which people have developed about the nature of this government. And that, I think, is what really hurts most.
John Trickett, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you very much for joining us there from West Yorkshire this afternoon. We're just going to talk you through one of the big results we've had in the last half hour, and that is for the Green Party, of course, who have taken Hackney, the first mayoral result that we have had. They have taken Hackney Mayor from Labour, and you can see the success that the Green Party have had there, because Labour won that back in 2022. They had 60% of the vote back then, but and Zoe Garbett got just 17%. But how the fortunes have changed there. Zoe Garbett with more than 35,000 votes, pushing Labour into second place. And you can see the vote share, Greens up 47% there. They have 47% of the vote, Labour 36%. The other parties much, much lower, but it was very much a tight contest between Greens and Labour. and it is the Green Party that has taken it, with gaining 30% of the share. That's the change since 2022. You can see just how much the Green Party's fortunes have changed. We may as well. No, we can't see the swing from that, but you can see, Nick, just how dramatic that result has been for the Green Party.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Greens said they were going to do well. They said they were going to do well in London, and you have that sort of iconic Labour era in Hackney. You know, Diane Abbott,
a real stronghold.
Elected as a Labour MP, now sits as an independent representing part of that. So yes, it is a really big moment. But what's interesting about this is that there was a poll last week that showed the net favourability ratings for Zach Palansky, the leader of the Green Party in England, Wales, going down, as we were saying, by 14 points. His personal ratings off the back of his response to the Golders Green attack. But as John Curtis points out, whenever you mention that decline in his personal ratings of 14 points, said that the Green Party vote only went down by 1 point. So you're seeing results like that.
Right, well, let's see more results now, because Vicky's here with some results that we have. Oh, we don't, not quite yet, Vicky, but we're going to talk to Vicky in a moment, because Vicky has got some news on what is going on in Manchester. But in the meantime, let's continue talking about that. And also just what we were hearing from John Trickett, you know, a Labour grandee, really. He's been around a long time, hasn't he? Very clearly calling for the Prime Minister to go curtains for Keir, he says.
Well, the man that Gordon Brown tasked with being his parliamentary aide when he was Prime Minister has said, as you say, curtains for Keir. Keir Starmer has got to go. That is a significant moment. Important to say that John Trickett is on the left of the Labour Party.
And has been a long-term critic of the
He's
Prime Minister.
in the campaign group. That was originally the Jeremy Corbyn group. So there's no love lost between him and Keir Starmer. But it will be a significant intervention. But when you said, Sophie, to John Trickett, oh, curtains for Keir, who should replace him? He said, let's have a debate. Now, the point is, if Keir Starmer goes, you instantly have a leadership contest. And John Trickett's reluctance to say it should be Angela Rayner, it should be Ed Miliband, it should be Andy Burnham, his reluctance to say that and to call for a debate may illustrate the reason why Keir Starmer is still Prime Minister. What's the plan? Who replaces him? You don't replace a Prime Minister with a debate.
Indeed. Vicky, we cannot talk to Vicky. Hello, Vicky.
Hello. I'm just going to tell you a bit about Manchester. Now, this is, again, one of those ones where the headline doesn't tell the whole story, because the headline is that this is a Labour hold. Manchester will be run by Labour. But it's early days, OK? So it's early days. Only 8 out of the 32 seats have been declared. So we must bear that in mind. But you can see already the point about this is that only a third of the seats in Manchester are up for grabs. That's why Labour will continue to run it. They've got 58 seats. But the story is going to be, as we can see here so far, what is happening to the Greens. So the Greens, look, they are up 5. What's happened so far, and it's very early days during this count, but Labour have lost all the seats so far that they are defending. And you can see this probably best here with the vote share. So Labour, 29%, but look at that Green vote at the moment, early days in this counting, 37% is their vote share there. And this is the kind of area where they would be hoping to do well. The Greens, of course, won a by-election in Manchester, in Gorton, not very long ago. And there's a lot of concentration on Manchester and Greater Manchester, and that's partly because of the Mayor, Andy Burnham. There's an awful lot of chat about whether he might come back, try and find a parliamentary seat, have a by-election. And then people are talking about, well, if he does that, what happens to the election for a new Mayor of Greater Manchester? Well, you wouldn't be feeling that optimistic at the moment if you were Labour. We've seen it nearby as well in Wigan, where they have lost every single seat that they've been trying to defend. Let's have a quick look at the change since 2022. But as I say, only 8 out of the 32 seats declared. You can see Labour down dramatically, 32%. The Greens up 27%. So this is the kind of place where the Greens will be hoping to do very well, adding to their tally. Sophie.
Vicky, thank you very much. We're going to go to Westminster now. Jacob Rees-Mogg is there, former Conservative MP who joins us now. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Tell us what you're making of everything that's been going on so far.
Well, it's absolutely gripping, isn't it, that people like us have been staying up into the early hours and then waking up to find out what's happening. I thought there was no such thing as a safe seat, and then you brought us the result from Orkney, which looked like a rotten borough with 70% for the Liberal Democrats. So it's always interesting to watch what's happening. The change for Labour is, however, the overwhelming story, and the fact that they're losing both to the Greens and to Reform. Now, I've noticed that John Curtis has been saying that they haven't been necessarily losing votes directly to Reform. It's that their votes been going down and Reform has been consolidating the right votes. I think that's an important part of this.
What about the fortunes of the Conservative Party? We had Robert Jenrick on earlier, who said that the Conservative Party is dead.
Well, I heard Robert say that. I think it's rather rum to say that when you wanted to be leader of the party relatively recently. So I think he's obviously got a particular axe to grind. The Conservative Party has had a bit of a curate's egg of an evening, hasn't it? That winning back Westminster, a flagship seat, is a good step forward, doing well in Wandsworth, possibly getting that back with one seat independent, holding the balance, holding on in Hampshire. There are some signs of light, but I think what this shows is the need to reunite the right. That, again, John Curtis is pointing out that Reform is doing extraordinarily well in places that voted Leave in the referendum. The Conservatives are still doing well in places that were the less Leave voting areas. If you combine that, it's an unstoppable force in British politics against a divided left and a sort of moribund Labour Party currently.
You've lost hundreds of seats already, nearly 200 seats already. You're making it perhaps sound better than the situation is.
Well, I'm interested in uniting the right, and so Reform doing well and taking lots of seats off Labour, seats that the Conservatives would have been most unlikely to win, seems to me to make it a good thing for what I would call the broad Tory family, rather than specifically for the Conservative Party.
When you talk about uniting the right, is there any indication that that would mean from you, I mean, some sort of coalition between Reform and the Conservative Party? Is that the way forward?
Well, I think we're likely to see that happen at the local level in some councils anyway, just because of what's thrown up by the voters. But yes, I would favour a coupon election at the next general election, with people having a clear view that the Conservatives and Reform are working together. I think that's much better. It's more honest with the voters than a post-election coalition.
So, Jacob, it's Nick Watt here. But when you look at these results, I mean, you think of Essex, Reform UK winning in Essex. I think I'm right in saying that 6 members of the shadow cabinet, led by Kemi Badenoch, are Essex MPs. And you've always been saying you wouldn't jump ship. You're not going to join Reform UK, but there should be this sort of alignment, as you say, a coupon election like the 1918 election. But Kemi Badenoch is saying absolutely not. How could I do a coalition, an agreement with a party, Reform UK, that wants to destroy my party? Kemi Badenoch's not going to budge. Isn't it time for you to jump ship?
No, it isn't. And Nigel Farage has been making softer noises about coming to an arrangement. What's interesting is that the bits that have gone for Reform are the bits that have tended to return the most Reform-minded Conservative MPs, the people who are most clearly Conservative. You haven't got in Essex sort of dripping wet Tory MPs, have you? You've got the Mark Francois of this world, the Priti Patels, the John Whittingdales, Kemi herself. You've got pretty right-wing Conservatives in Essex, and this is just showing that the Tory party got into trouble by flirting with Lib Demery, and when it's offering the real deal, real conservatism, that is more attractive, and people are thinking they can get that from Reform. So I think Kemi's strategy is right, to be clearly identifying herself as a capital C Conservative, but that we need to work with other capital C Conservatives.
Jacob Rees-Mogg, we have with us here in the studio now Dr. David Bull, obviously the chairman of Reform. Uniting the right, is there a future where you join forces with the Conservative Party?
No, absolutely not. I love Jacob's sort of mantra there, but look, Reform UK is doing incredibly well. We're 4 years old. I think it's worth remembering we're only 4 years old, and actually the meteoric ascendancy of this party is quite something. I've been saying throughout the night that I've been going around the country for the last 10 months. I've seen 30,000 people in village halls and working men's clubs and across the board. And it doesn't really matter where I am in the United Kingdom, whether it's the Isle of Wight or Hull or Liverpool. Liverpool, 80% voted Labour at the last election. That has been absolutely slashed. These people in Liverpool absolutely fed up coming over to us. Look at Scotland, look at Wales. So I actually think that the Reform UK is doing incredibly well. What you're seeing, I think, tonight, today. The Labour Party is losing control of its heartlands, and I think the Conservative Party are being sort of decimated into almost a pressure group which is focused on certain specific areas. And one of the other things that I think is interesting from us is geographically, if you look at where we're winning, it's across the United Kingdom.
There aren't actually any elections in Liverpool, are there, just to be clear?
No, sorry, but I meant just in terms of the
yeah.
polling that we're seeing. So there is a seismic shift going on in terms of British politics.
I mean, David, Nick Watt here. I mean, let me just share with you something that an ally of Keir Starmer has been sharing with me. And I'm interested to hear what you say to this. And they're sharing an analysis by Peter Kellner, the pollster, saying that Nigel Farage should be privately worried by this result, that you got 41% of all the seats you fought last year and 33% this year. So Nigel Farage should be privately worried.
Absolute rubbish. I mean, the fact is I started here, actually, last night, saying a good result for us would be 1,000 seats. And as the night has gone on, I've become more bullish. I'm thinking, well, 1,100, 1,200, for example. Of course, the problem is with some of these predictions is that some of the pollsters are saying we could get 1,500. Now, is that hostage to fortune? In many ways, if we don't do that, people say, oh, you've had a terrible night. Just, Nick, you will remember they said we had peaked at 2%. They said we had peaked at 4%. And so on. And, of course, we're consistently polling at 27, 28, 29%. That is borne out in these results as well. And if you transpose that to a general election, what does that mean? It means that actually those two main parties are in serious trouble. It would mean the likes of Angela Rayner, Rachel Reeves, Wes Streeting would all be out, Shabana Mahmood would be out, Rishi Sunak would be out. Look at that Essex result. So you've got Kemi Badenoch and James Cleverly. They are in serious trouble. You can see that history.
Sorry, Jacob. He's shaking his head at what you're saying.
No, well, not so much shaking my head as I think we've got to get a sense of proportion about this. The headline figure on councillors is very, very good for reform. It is a very good night for reform. There's no question about that. But in general election terms, you need to look at percentage of the vote. And reform cannot win an outright majority when it's between 25 and 30% of the vote. And if you look at last year, when it was getting in the low 30s, it doesn't seem to be able to get up above that. And that fits in with John Curtis's analysis that the people who are likely to vote reform are people who once supported Brexit. That's why you need to bring the right together, because actually in a general election, if reform gets mid-20s% and the Conservatives get low 20s%, you're then talking about a coalition of the left running the country.
But you see, Jacob, there's an issue there, because actually half of Labour voters are now voting for us. They do not want a Tory party 2.0. 40% of our voters did not go to university and 60% are young voters. So we are very clear. We cannot be a replication of the Tory party and Tory party 2.0. This is actually about bringing the left and the right together and actually forging a new future.
Well, bringing the left and the right together is something that people talk about, but it's pie in the sky stuff. That there are right-wing parties and there are left-wing parties, and Reform is unquestionably a right-wing party. And the people who have moved to Reform, who were Labour, were also the people who were sympathetic to Boris Johnson and have been moving to the right over an extended period, partly because of the way the Labour Party has moved.
I'm very sorry, Sir Jacob, I'm just going to interrupt you there because we're actually going to Dundee because we've got a declaration, our second result from Scotland.
I'm about to make the declaration for the Dundee City West constituency. I, Gregory Colgan, constituency returning officer for the Scottish parliamentary election and the Dundee City West constituency, give notice that the total number of votes polled for each candidate is as follows. Heather Anderson, Scottish National Party, 12,722. Abby Brooks, Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, 881. Daniel Coleman, Scottish Liberal Democrats, 1,980. Arthur Keith, Reform UK, 3,315. Michael Mara, Scottish Labour Party, 6,365. Jim McFarlane, Scottish Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition, 649. Rejected ballot papers, want of an official mark, 0. Voting for more than one candidate, 11. Writing on mark by which voter can be identified, 1. Unmarked or void for uncertainty, 98. That gives a total rejected ballots of 110. The electorate turnout was 46.4%. The valid votes was 25,912. Rejected votes 110, which gives a total verified votes of 26,022. There were 110 spoilt papers. I therefore declare that Heather Anderson, Scottish National Party, is duly elected to serve as the constituency member of the Scottish Parliament for Dundee City West.
Well, let's recap now for that Dundee City West result. SNP, Heather Anderson, 12,722. Labour's Michael Marra, 6,365. Reform in third place with Arthur Keith getting 3,315. Liberal Democrats, Daniel Coleman, 1,900. And the others very much reduced positions for them. But the interesting thing about this is, in a turnout of 46%, the majority for the SNP with his new MSP coming in has been halved. So it was a very safe SNP seat. It still is. Joe Fitzpatrick was a minister who has since stood down, and we now have a new MSP. So that's a whole for Dundee City West. Let's look at that result in terms of percentage. SNP 49%, Labour 25%, Reform 13%, Liberal Democrats 8%, Conservatives 3%, and others 3% as well. And let's now look at the change in Dundee West. And as I said, a halving of the majority. SNP down 13%, Labour up 3%, Reform up 13%. It's a good result for Reform. 4% Liberal Democrats, and Conservatives down 7%. Brian Taylor, that's the second result in. What do you make of that one?
It's always wonderful to get news from the great and noble city of Dundee, guess where I was born. And this is a remarkable result for two reasons. One, the SNP hanging on, the Labour Party making some gains, but very, very small gains. Look at that reform vote. The reform vote is quite startling. Majority, as you say, is halved. But on a turnout that is perhaps relatively low. I'm not sure exactly what the turnout was last time, but the overall turnout would appear to be down. Good result for the SNP. Congratulations to the winner. And as you say, it was a former minister who was standing there. It would have been an absolute shock if the SNP were not taking Dundee City West, which in days gone by, they used to weigh the Labour vote in that area.
Emily, look at that turnout, 46%. What does that tell you? Very low.
I mean, it is low, but you know that's not unusual in some of the inner city urban seats. We also often see lower turnout in some constituencies in Glasgow.
And does the reform vote tell us anything about other areas? For example, we're going to get the Dundee East vote, which was again a minister standing down, an SNP minister standing down. Would it suggest to you that there might be a bleed into the wider Dundee constituencies?
I think it's just too early to say, but what we could see in constituencies across Scotland, it's going to be really important to look out for where the Reform managed to split that unionist vote and let the SNP in through the middle.
Absolutely, but the other thing we can look for in Reform there is the lists.
Yeah, absolutely.
The list. What about that's where Reform will make it in Scotland.
I mean, there's the speculation that Reform might manage to take the Bamford-Buchan seat, or Bamshire and Buchan Coast seat as it's now called. Maybe that will not be the case, but where they're going to pick up seats is if they are getting that level of support, then they're going to pick up seats on the list. The decline in the SNP vote, I mean, there's going to be a decline in the SNP
19
vote.
years in power, disaffection.
And the polls suggested that instead, that they're down from the 40s to the 30s in overall voting support. So therefore, that's going to happen. The question is whether they can still hang on in sufficient seats and maybe get one or two compensatory seats on the list that they only had 2 the last time, to give them a chance of being the government across the road there.
Emily, a little earlier on, our Scotland editor James Cook came in with the gossip that SNP will maybe lose in Edinburgh Central, and that's incredibly important. But also that there is a great disaffection with what's happening in the SNP in terms of the government not actually delivering on so many different things. And will that, do you think, create considerable turmoil now?
Well, I mean, it still looks clear that the SNP are very likely to be returned as the largest party again. But certainly what we're picking up in the polling is that voters have pretty low expectations of what the SNP is likely to do if it's returned to government.
And next time we talk, let's talk about deal making, because that was the way the Parliament was set up for deal making. But now, Sophie, it's over to you.
We're going to, we've had in the last few minutes the leader of the Green Party in England and Wales, Zach Polansky, who has been visiting Hackney. They've just won the mayor there in East London. He was there to celebrate Zoe Garbett's election as the party's first elected mayor, and this is what he had to say.
This is a historic victory. This is the first time the Green Party have ever won a directly elected mayor. And two-party politics is not just dying, it is dead and it is buried. And actually, whether it's here that Labour have been rejected or whether we're seeing around the country, it's very clear that the new politics is the Green Party versus Reform. I said that the Green Party were going to replace Labour. That's exactly what we did in Gorton and Denton. It's what we've done in Hackney, and we're seeing that right across the country. In fact, in almost all of our seats, right across the country, whether they're target or non-target, the Green Party vote share is rising.
Zach Polansky there speaking not long ago in Hackney in North London, the first Green mayor there. Well, the counts are continuing across Scotland, Wales and England. So many more results still to come in. You can see Cambridge there and Islington. Let's go to North London. Ellie Price is in Barnet, and we can also go to Yorkshire. Gemma Dillon is in Wakefield. We'll start with Ellie in Barnet.
Well, Sophie, I've been to enough dusty sports halls in my time. I want to just draw your attention to this Sunderland boat plane in the background where they're counting behind it. So I think that gives you something of a decent backdrop, doesn't it, for an election count. We had been expecting some declarations here by 11:30 this morning, the count having started at 9 o'clock this morning. Interestingly, nothing has been forthcoming so far. And in fact, one ward, the ward of Whetstone, we understand there is a recount going on. And that seems to be the picture here today, that both sources from both the Labour Party and the Conservatives here saying that it's those extra parties that are kind of skewing the vote share here. This is a council back in 2022, the baseline year for this set of election results here, where Labour swept to power with 41 councillors and Tories taking 22 councillors, the Conservatives having historically held this council over the many years. And it had very much been a target for the Conservatives. Kemi Badenoch having visited in the last few days of campaigning. She'd come around in a black cab as part of her tour of London boroughs. But what we're hearing today is that there are, as I say, these other parties, the Greens and Reform, having fielded full set of candidates, as well as Conservatives and Labour, for these elections here. And that seems to be skewing the vote share. So, as I say, no results so far here. Now, as I say, it had been a two-horse race in effect in this council ever since the last elections here. There had been a couple of defections, most notably the former Conservative leader, Dan Thomas, who went on to be the leader of Reform UK in Wales. So those have been the sort of notable defections here. But interestingly, talking to some of the candidates, one of them told me that the phrases on the doorstep coming up had been potholes, planting trees and genocide, because of course the context of this council is that it's one of the communities, highest communities of Jewish voters here. It's also got one of the highest communities of Iranian voters, and of course just up the road, a couple of miles up the road, is Golders Green, the centre of course those stabbings a few weeks ago, as well as that area where the Jewish ambulances were set on fire. So very much obviously local issues taking precedent, but clearly some international issues here very much coming up on the doorstep too. So really interesting to see exactly what happens here. As I say, we haven't had any declarations yet. We're expecting some in the coming minutes, half an hour or so, but as so far no clear clarity. But talking to the Conservatives here, as I say, it had been one of their targets. I think a sense that it will still remain a sort of Labour Conservative run council. Probably a feeling that possibly the Tories haven't done enough to take control. Labour feeling, one of the candidates I spoke to saying they'd probably just about hold on, but with a reduced majority. But I'm afraid I've got nothing to base it on, as I say, because we haven't had any declarations here, because there's a real sense that during the counting there is sort of vote share being very much skewed by the incoming Greens and Reform candidates here.
Ellie, we'll definitely come back to you when you do have a result. We're going to go to West Yorkshire now. Gemma Dillon is in Wakefield. Now, this is going going to be a very interesting one, Gemma, because this is a Labour stronghold, isn't it? Labour since, what, the early 1970s?
It has indeed been a Labour stronghold for decades. They have dominated local politics here, but today they are under extreme pressure. They're just announcing the first declaration today. It includes the Labour leader of the council, Denise Jeffrey, and the deputy leader as well. Just bear with me 2 ticks.
For each candidate at the election is as follows. Arthur Sheila Beatha Ann, Liberal Democrats 298. Chambers Matthew, Green Party 562. Drake Sandra, Reform UK 1961. Forrester Michael John, Reform UK 1949. Harkin Fiona Christian, Green Party 537. Jeffrey Denise Margaret, Labour Party 1357. Lee Claire Michelle, Labour Party 1202. More Rob Michael.
Well, there you are, the latest result from Wakefield, where it has been a very dramatic few hours, because it looks like Reform has indeed won Wakefield. Nick, a Labour stronghold.
A Labour stronghold, lots of sort of senior Labour MPs in that part of West Yorkshire, and once again we're seeing Reform UK in all parts of the country appearing to do rather well.
Well, it is an awful lot going on in the next few hours, because, as we said, many of these counts still ongoing. We will obviously stay with you throughout the afternoon. We've only had a handful in Scotland, and we've had no results yet at all from Wales, but Kirsty and Clive will be with you throughout the afternoon with all the latest results. Thank you to everybody who has joined us on the BBC Election 2026 this afternoon, this morning. Vicky Young as well, with her analysis of all the seats as they appeared, or the councils as they appeared, and Nick Watt as well for joining me here. But right now, it is time on BBC One to go to the BBC News at 1. Laura Kuensberg will be back here at 2 for all the latest. From us, goodbye.